Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Deku and Bakugou were teen parents. All credits for this video go to their respective authors. So please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. She grabbed his arm and dragged him further into the alleyway. What are you doing? She put one of her hands over his mouth, shushing him. I'm going to make you feel so good, she said, Izuku smelling the alcohol from her breath. Suddenly she used her quirk to glue his mouth shut, arms and legs now glued to the alley wall behind him. He tried to scream as loud as he could, but nothing came out. Help. He wanted to scream, I don't want this, but he couldn't make a noise. Suddenly he heard metal clinking and felt his pants being pulled down. He tried screaming again, I'm only 14, I don't want this, but it only turned out as muffled cries. He felt her hands at the hem of his boxers and then, Deku. He blinked a few times and took in his surroundings. Right, he thought, Kaken found me. It wouldn't be a bad thing if you didn't count the fact that he had a bag of all of his things and was just about to fall asleep in an alleyway. Izuku groaned as he thought about explaining everything to Katsuki. Izuku got home, as quiet as he's been for about a month now, a stark contrast to before when he would come home with a smile and greet his mother with a hug. Inko was starting to get worried and asked Izuku what was wrong. After not getting an answer, per usual, she put her foot down this time. She didn't let Izuku leave the room until he told her what was wrong. It's rude, she knows, but she's worried about her baby. Is he getting bullied again? After a few minutes of silently sitting in the dining room, Izuku mumbled something. Izuku, repeat that louder, please, Inko requested, not able to hear what her son had said at first. As she touched me. Once Inko got over her surprise, a look of anger passed over her face. You were weak enough to let a woman overpower you. Izuku nodded, fear overpowering the rest of his emotions. Inko looked furious. Get out. Izuku had to do a double take of his mother's words. What? Inko looked at him, hand raised. I said get out. You were weak enough to begin with, and now you're letting women overpower you. Izuku started crying harder. But mom her quirk, I don't give a damn about her quirk. You let her overpower you. Pack your shit and get out. Izuku took a second to process her words and shot upstairs after she yelled at him to hurry up. He packed all of his stuff, grabbed some food and stuffed it into his bag, and left the house. Tears poured out of his eyes as he walked down the road. Where would he go? Where could he go? He walked for what felt like hours. The sun was almost set by the time he found an alley to sit in. He put his bag down and sat next to it. He leaned his head back against the wall. What am I going to do? He asked himself. I don't have anyone else to go to and I wouldn't last a day out here. His eyes were starting to droop and his exhaustion hit him like a bus. He curled up in a ball, his bag held tightly in his grip, about to fall asleep when he heard a voice, Deku. There was a snapping noise and he opened his eyes to see Katsuki snapping in front of his face. What the hell are you doing on the streets, you damn Deku? Katsuki asked, with genuine curiosity, a little bit of worry, and some annoyance in his tone. Izuku opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out so he closed it again. Katsuki stood straight up and crossed his arms over his chest before glaring down at Izuku. Well, I'm not gonna be here forever waiting for an answer. Before Izuku could think of anything he blurted out, Mom kicked me out. Katsuki looked surprised. Inko loves her son to death, why would she kick him out? Katsuki thought for a minute and then grabbed Izuku's arm. Kaken, where are we going? Katsuki scoffed and dragged Izuku off of the ground. We're going to my house. That old hag would kill me if she found out I left you on the streets and I don't want to get yelled at for it, even if I don't like you. Izuku just silently nodded and followed Katsuki with his head down. He started to zone out as they walked. What if Auntie thinks I'm weak too? Will she kick me out just like Mom did? Will she make me go home to Mom or will she help me? Izuku was snapped out of his thoughts as he bumped into something. He looked up to see Katsuki looking at him over his shoulder. We're here, dumbass. Watch where you're going next time. Izuku just nodded and followed Katsuki into the Bakugou household. Hag, old man, meet in the lounge room, we have a guest. Izuku heard the television's volume get lower, followed by Mitsuki screaming. Katsuki, don't call me a hag. Who'd you bring here anyway? Katsuki rolled his eyes as Izuku smiled slightly. Katsuki turned to Izuku. Take your shoes off and come into the lounge room. You're explaining why you were on the streets to the hag and old man. Izuku put his bag and backpack on the floor next to his shoes and put on a pair of slippers Katsuki grabbed from the closet before shuffling into the lounge room behind Katsuki. Mitsuki and Masaru looked up hearing footsteps. Looks of surprise flashed over their faces when they saw Izuku standing behind their son. Izuku, I haven't seen you in so long. How are you? How's Inko? Katsuki hasn't been rude to you, has he? Is that why you haven't been over for so long? I kept telling him to invite you and Inko to dinner. That brat never listens to me. I am fine, Auntie. Kaken hasn't been rude to me at all. Mom and I have just been busy. I promise. Mitsuki shook her head as she sat beside her husband. Where's Inko? Why are you here by yourself? I thought she had today off. Izuku flinched slightly at the mention of his mother's name. Before he could answer, Katsuki spoke. That's the reason I brought him here. He says she kicked him out. I don't know the details. I just knew you would get mad if I let him on the streets. Masaru looked at Izuku concerned as Mitsuki gasped. Inko kicked you out. Why would she do that? She always said she loved you, no matter how hard things were. As his wife wrapped her head around the situation, Masaru looked at the teenagers. Izuku, please sit down and make yourself at home. Katsuki, would you mind getting us some drinks? Katsuki scoffed but left to get drinks anyway as Izuku sat down. Mitsuki looked at Izuku. Why did she kick you out? You're so sweet and polite. You don't deserve that. Izuku starts picking at the skin around his nails. Katsuki noticing as he sets the drinks down. Katsuki sat next to Izuku on the couch, their knees slightly touching, a sign of comfort for Izuku. Don't worry, Masaru said, noticing the interaction. We won't judge you. I promise. Izuku took a deep breath and explained everything that had happened to the Bakugou family. When he was done talking, he was curled up on the couch with some tears running down his cheeks. Mitsuki had her hands over her mouth and looked as if she was holding in tears. Masaru was comforting his wife and looking lost. Katsuki just sat there stunned. This happened over a month ago and he never knew. That's what you get for bullying him, he thought. He doesn't trust you anymore. He sat with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped together, staring at the floor. Katsuki looked up when he felt something hit his shoulder. He saw Izuku's head on his shoulder, his body leaned to the side. He hesitated before slowly and carefully wrapping his arms around Izuku. Izuku looked at Katsuki surprised. Katsuki pushed Izuku's head down and hid his chin in the green, fluffy hair. He didn't want the younger boy to see his face. He had tears in his eyes and didn't want to cry in front of others. Izuku was confused but hugged Katsuki back anyway. He looked up when he heard Mitsuki and Masaru clear their throats. I think we should all get some sleep, so we can process this information. We can figure out how to handle this tomorrow, Masaru said, getting up from his spot on the couch. Izuku and Katsuki nodded as they got up off the couch. Mitsuki gave each of the boys a hug and wished them a good night before she left for her room, Masaru in tow. Izuku put his head down and started picking at the skin next to his nail. I'm sorry for inconveniencing you guys. I can handle this on my own, really. Izuku was cut off by a hug, Katsuki burying his face in Izuku's hair. Izuku hesitantly hugged back, confused. Feeling a slight shake from the older boy, Izuku backed up a little. He slowly raised his hands to Katsuki's face and pulled his face so they locked eyes. Kaken, why are you crying? Izuku asked, wiping the tears with his thumbs. Katsuki pulled Izuku back into the hug, not wanting his face to be seen while he was so vulnerable. I should have noticed, he whispered, voice becoming so quiet it was hard to hear. You became so quiet. You didn't try to participate in class. You stopped fighting back. You did so many things that were signs. Izuku buried his head in Katsuki's shoulder. It's not your fault, Kaken. You didn't know because I didn't want you to know. I didn't want anyone to know. So please, don't blame yourself. Katsuki nodded and stood still for a second before straightening himself out. He wiped his face with his hands and stood up straight. We should go to bed. I don't think we have a futon, so I can sleep on my floor and you can have the bed. Izuku followed Katsuki upstairs, constantly telling him that he didn't have to sleep on the floor. Katsuki didn't listen and got the floor ready to be slept on. He helped Izuku put some of his clothes in the closet before they got in bed. Good night, Kaken. Good night, Deku. Izuku woke up to the room empty and the smell of miso soup, gohan, tsukemono, natto, kobachi, and nori. He slowly got off the bed and looked around. Right, he thought, I spent the night at Kaken's. He put his slippers on and slowly walked downstairs. He saw Masaru at the table drinking green tea as Mitsuki and Katsuki cooked. He shuffled to the seat across from Masaru and received a small, comforting smile. Good morning, Izuku. I hope you slept well. Izuku nodded as Katsuki started setting the table. Izuku went to help but was pushed back into his seat by Mitsuki. No, honey. You sit, breakfast will be finished soon. Mitsuki served food to everyone and they sat down. Thank you for the lovely meal. Now, itadakamasu, Masaru said. Everyone ate in comfortable silence, with occasional jokes and goofy comments. When everyone was done eating, Katsuki put the dishes in the sink as Mitsuki told everyone to head to the living room. Once everyone was in the living room, Mitsuki clasped her hands together and had a tight-lipped smile on. With the new information we learned last night, she started, an upset look on her face. I've decided that Izuku needs to go get checked out. She looked toward the said boy. I know you may not want to, but nobody knows what this woman could have given you. I also think we should file a police report, but I'm leaving that completely up to you, Izuku. Izuku nodded. Can it just be Masaru-san and Kaken with me, Mitsuki-san? I don't want to be rude or anything, but I think I'll feel more comfortable with just the three of us, at least for the doctor's portion. Mitsuki gave Izuku the best smile she could muster. No offense taken, Izuku. I understand why it would make you more comfortable. We'll go to the police station in about 10 minutes. Then we'll head to the hospital. But I'll wait in the car or waiting room for the three of you. Izuku nodded and said he was going to go get ready. He entered Katsuki's room and sat on the edge of the bed. He changed quickly and sat back down, this time against the wall with his head on his lap. There was a knock on the door and Izuku didn't answer it. Deku, he heard Katsuki say, I'm coming in. Katsuki entered and saw Izuku. He freaked out for a second, not doing emotions often, and went to get his dad. Masaru knocked, even though the door was cracked, and walked into the room, closing it fully behind him. Izuku, can I touch you? Izuku nodded and melted into the side hug Masaru immediately pulled him into. Do you want to talk about it? Or would you rather just hug? Izuku sniffled, wiping his nose with the hoodie he had on. What if they don't believe me? Oh, or they judge me? Or D don't do anything about it B because I'm quirkless? I'm scared, Masaru-san. I want to be believed, but what if they just D don't care? What will I do? Masaru just hugged Izuku tighter, moving one of his hands to run through the boy's hair. Mitsuki wouldn't let that happen. Izuku looked up. She will make sure that they take you as seriously as they would take a pro. She loves you like she loves Katsuki. Last night she kept telling me that she was going to make your life better, no matter how hard it is. I promise you, Izuku, she won't let anyone let this slide. Izuku sniffled again, feeling better. Thank you, Masaru-san. I am really thankful for you and Mitsuki-san. Masaru nodded and left the room, telling Izuku that they were leaving soon. Katsuki walked in right after Masaru left, going to sit next to Izuku, but not too close. I heard what the old man told you. He's right, you know. The old hag asks about you at least once a week. She really missed you. Izuku nodded, noticing the awkward silence and how Katsuki seemed to be struggling with his words. He was about to reach out and touch Katsuki's arm when Katsuki turned his head away, mumbling something. Izuku couldn't hear it, so he asked him to repeat it. I said that I'm sorry for not noticing, and for being an asshole, and that I'm happy, I guess, that I found you on the street yesterday, Katsuki said, cheeks tinting pink. Now get out. I need to change. Izuku smiled at Katsuki. It's okay, Kaken. I didn't want anyone to notice. Katsuki nodded and closed the door. Izuku giggled as he headed down the stairs to his front door. Katsuki came downstairs a minute later, throwing his shoes on right away. Izuku was nervous on the way to the police station, leg bouncing and picking at his nails. Katsuki noticed and slowly moved to the middle seat, letting their legs touch the slightest bit. Masaru noticed in the mirror and smiled. It seemed that Izuku was easily comforted by touch despite what happened. Once they got to the station, Izuku started picking his nails again. Masaru noticing and grabbing one of Izuku's hands to place it on his arm. Izuku gave Masaru a grateful smile as he walked into the police station with the family. Katsuki trailed behind them, feeling uneasy about the situation still. They had to wait in a short line before talking to an officer. But once Mitsuki stated the reason they were there, they were rushed to a separate, more private waiting room. A few minutes after being escorted into the room, a detective walked out, waving to the family. Hello, I'm Detective Tsukachi Naomosa and I'll be taking care of your case. May I ask who Midoriya Izuku is? Izuku raised his hand slightly. That's me, sir. The detective nodded and crouched down in front of the boy, noticing two men on either side of him. Hello, Midoriya-san. Would you feel more comfortable talking out here or in a private room? I just want to let you know that either way the conversation will have to be recorded as a precaution. Can we talk out here, Tsukachi-san? Of course, Midoriya-kun. Naomosa smiled slightly. Let me grab my recording device and we can get started. Izuku nodded as the detective left the room. Izuku let go of Masaru's arm to curl into a ball on his chair, looking towards Katsuki. Kaken, the young boy whispered. Katsuki made a noise and looked down at the boy. Can I maybe hold your hand? I am sorry. Never mind. That was a stupid question. Udon. Izuku was cut off by the blonde boy putting his hand on the other's lap, between his legs and torso. Izuku made a noise of surprise but smiled, grabbing the large hand with both of his own. He played with Katsuki's fingers, as a toddler would play with his parents until the detective walked back in the room. I have started the recording. Case number 021493, Midoriya Izuku. Midoriya-san, would you please state your age, name, quirk, and reason for investigation? Midoriya Izuku. I am 14 years old. I am quirkless and am here because I was raped a month ago, Izuku answered, playing with Katsuki's hand more aggressively. Tears welled up in his eyes. What if they tell me to get out because I'm quirkless? Tsukachi frowned. I'm deeply sorry for your situation, Midoriya-san. I have some more personal questions for you that may bring back unpleasant memories. Please tell me if you need a break or would like some water. Izuku nodded and waited for the first question to be asked, surprised that he was still in the building and why the detective looked so confused. May I know who you're here with today? I am here with the Bakugou family. Sukachi nodded. Why are you with the Bakugou family today? Izuku felt a few tears escape. Wiping them with one of his hands, my mother kicked me out after I told her what happened. This was yesterday night around 8 p.m. Sukachi nodded. Thank you for specifying. Can you explain what happened to you? You can take a break or two in between if you need to. Please don't overdo yourself. I was on my way home one day after school when I passed by a bar. It was on the shortcut home. I walked past as usual and noticed someone following me. I looked behind me and a lady was there. She looked to be in her early 30s. Izuku took a deep breath. He started drawing random shapes on the back of Katsuki's hand in an attempt to not pick at his fingers. She got in front of me somehow and pushed me into an alley. She used her quirk. I think it was glue or something similar. I glued my mouth shut. Then she glued my hands to the wall and my legs to a crate. She put you under me. Mitsuki was furious. How could anyone near her age do that to such a young boy? She didn't realize she started crying for the boy until her husband grabbed one of her hands with his and placed her head on his shoulder. She could feel that he was upset too, the tension in his body making it obvious. Katsuki was so upset, hearing about the abuse his classmate went through and that it was only a few blocks from the school. If only he walked that route home like he usually did, he could have stopped it. Deku wouldn't have gone through all that pain. Katsuki felt something hurt his hand and looked at it to see Izuku picking at the skin around Katsuki's finger instead of his own. Katsuki moved his hand around, placing his thumb on the back of Izuku's hand, stroking it back and forth as he had seen his dad do to his mom when she got upset. It seemed to work and Izuku went back to drawing random shapes and letters. Izuku finished his explanation, eyes becoming dry from all of the crying, and looked up at the detective as he said something about another question. Midoriya-san, please state your address and your parents' legal names. Izuku looked confused but answered, making sure the detective knew that he didn't know who his father was. Sukachi nodded and stood up, smiling down at the boy and his unofficial family. Thank you all for your time, especially you Midoriya-san. I know that was hard for you. I recommend going to a hospital and getting checked out. I will contact you if I have any further questions. Have a good rest of your day. The detective ended the recording and showed them to the door. Izuku didn't let go of Katsuki's hand as he stood up, letting the blonde guide him as he played with the boy's hand. Once they got in the car, Izuku sat in the middle seat. He bowed his head as he addressed the two adults in the front seat. Thank you Mitsuki-san and Masaru-san for taking me to these places and letting me spend the night. I appreciate it a lot. Oh, Izuku, Mitsuki said, turning around in her seat. It's honestly the best thing we could do for you. Who knows what could have happened if you fell asleep in that alley. I'm upset with your mother. I thought she would be better than throwing you out, but I'm glad that we're so close. I love you Izuku. Okay. You're welcome to stay for as long as you need, even if it's until you're an adult. Izuku nodded and tears started dwelling in his eyes again. These ones of happiness. Masaru made small talk with Izuku about heroes and the like. They talked about Izuku's future and what he plans to do. Katsuki was pleasantly surprised when he learned that Izuku still wanted to be a hero. The rest of the way to the hospital was spent making jokes and laughing, the two teenagers never letting go of the other's hand. Once they got to the parking lot, Mitsuki turned back to Izuku. She gently reached her hand out, letting him choose if he wanted her to touch his head, and in the softest tone, she could say, I'll wait right here okay Izuku. Katsuki and Masaru will take good care of you. If they do anything that you don't feel comfortable with, make sure to tell them. You deserve to be treated with the utmost professionalism and care. I love you, Izuku. Izuku pushed his face into Mitsuki's hand and repeatedly thanked her until he was dragged out of the car by Katsuki. He gripped Katsuki's hand tighter, the latter rubbing his thumb over the smaller boy's hand in an attempt to calm him down. Izuku took a deep breath before following Masaru inside, relishing the comforting feeling of Katsuki's hand. Once they got into the hospital, Masaru briefly explained the situation to the receptionists, showing the paper they had from Detective Tsukachi that said the tests were to be done immediately after arrival. It also said that they were to send a copy of the results to him as soon as they could. The three of them got taken into a room as soon as the receptionist read the note, putting in the side note that Izuku was to have male doctors only. They waited in the room for about 20 minutes before doctors came in, 2 to be exact. They asked Izuku some quick questions, finding out what tests they needed to run. Once the doctors knew what they had to do, they gave Izuku a rundown of each of the tests. Would you like to have your family leave the room? We want to do whatever we can to make sure you are the most comfortable you can be, the first doctor said. Izuku looked around the room. Masaru-san, he whispered. Could you leave, please? Masaru smiled and nodded. Of course, Izuku. Have your doctors let me know when you're done. Izuku smiled as Masaru was escorted into the hallway. He closed his eyes and held Katsuki's hand tighter. Kaken, I know this is weird, but can you set off small explosions? They look really cool. Katsuki looked at Izuku and just nodded, putting his other hand in front of Izuku once the doctors started the test. He let off tiny explosions, making some look more like fireworks, a new trick he's been working on. Izuku played with his other one, curling and uncurling his fingers and drawing shapes on it while watching the explosion. After what felt like forever, the tests were over and the doctors told Masaru that he was good to go back in the room. Masaru walked back in, smiling at the sight of his son entertaining Izuku. It was one of the first times he's seen him so gentle in a while. They waited in the room for about a half hour more for the test results. Izuku talked to Masaru most of the time, asking Katsuki questions to make sure he was okay every now and then. The doctors came back in with a stack of papers. We've got good news, Midoriya-kun. You are safe from any diseases that you could have gotten and there is no permanent physical trauma from the incident. It's safe to say that you can go home and relax until Detective Tsukachi contacts you. I hope you all have a good weekend. The doctors walked the makeshift family to the door before leaving for other appointments. Izuku was so happy. He didn't have to worry about any physical side effects, just the emotional and social ones. Once he got into the car, he let go of Katsuki's hand for the first time since the police station. Mitsuki-san, they said that I am healthy and won't have any physical issues. Thank you for bringing me here into the station, and for taking care of me. I appreciate it a lot, Izuku said, hugging Mitsuki from the back seat. Mitsuki smiled at the boy and hugged him back. Of course, Izuku. I will do anything I can to help you with anything. Izuku smiled and sat back in his seat, right next to Katsuki, and buckled up. Katsuki looked up when he felt their legs touch again, oddly not minding the feeling. Hey, hag, Katsuki called, earning a don't call me a hag. Can we get food? I'm hungry. Mitsuki nodded and asked where the two boys wanted to go for food. Deku, Katsuki asked, turning to face Izuku. What kind of food do you want? Can we go somewhere with Katsuden? I haven't had it in a bit. Of course we can, Izuku. The next morning Izuku woke up feeling better. He wasn't quite back to normal, nor was he expected to be, but the first thing he did was ask to take a shower. This may seem normal, but to the Bakugous this was amazing information. They could tell that Izuku hadn't showered in a while when Katsuki found him. They realized he didn't have clothes, as he hadn't been back to his house yet, but he said he was okay with wearing what he already had on. Mitsuki absolutely did not allow this, because why would she allow him to wear dirty clothes, and was happy when Katsuki offered up clothes instead of waiting for her to offer them for him. After Izuku showered, he put on Katsuki's clothes. It was a simple orange shirt and black basketball shorts, but they looked big on Izuku. He wasn't swimming in them, but they were obviously baggy. He came down into the kitchen, looking so much more refreshed than he had been the past 2 days. He saw a sullen look on Mitsuki and Masaru's faces and saw that Katsuki looked just as confused as he was sure he did. WhatIf the sullen faces, Mitsuki and Masaru-san? Izuku asked, cocking his head to the side. Masaru patted the seat next to him and across from Katsuki. Sit down, buddy. This might be a bit much to take in this early. Izuku hesitantly nodded and sat down next to Masaru. He started to pick at his fingers again and Masaru and Katsuki noticed. Before Masaru could reach Izuku, he saw Katsuki's hand. Katsuki was moving it slowly, as if he was trying to not scare Izuku. He placed his hand on the table, right in front of Izuku, and made a few tiny explosions go off. He made sure that they were big enough to gain his attention, but too small to scare or hurt him. You need to stop doing that, stupid nerd, he said, making more explosions go off. I'll try Kaken, Izuku said, moving his hands above the table, messing with Katsuki's like he had the day before. I don't know how to make this easier to swallow, Izuku, Mitsuki started, but Detective Tsukachi called about an hour ago. Izuku tensed up at the mention of a call from the detective. Katsuki blew off more smaller explosions in a hope to get the boy to relax. Luckily it worked. He called to tell us some important stuff. As you know, Masaru continued, he had some officers go to your house the other night and arrest Inko. They arrested her on claims of neglect and maltreatment of a minor. They were planning to have you come into the station and answer questions about it, but she admitted to kicking you out and repeated what she said to you to them. He never told us what she said, don't worry. But since she admitted to it, she is going to be put in jail for a minimum of 1 year and maximum of 2. And since she is your only legal guardian, as they couldn't get in contact with your father, you have 2 choices. Masaru took a break, letting Izuku process all of the information he was just told. He saw tears in Izuku's eyes as he realized what one of his options were. He also noticed that his son had gotten tense, him and Izuku now holding hands instead of Izuku playing with Katsuki. Mitsuki took her hands and placed them on the table, on a diagonal towards Izuku. I know you know that one of your options is the foster system. She saw Izuku tense up, but we all know that isn't safe for you. I know that none of us would feel comfortable with you in the system. The only other choice you have is to live with us, as I was your mother's best friend, and we signed a contract saying that if anything happened to us when you guys were under 18 that you had a choice to move in with the other. So, Izuku, Masaru said, putting a hand out toward Izuku as well. We want to know if you would be happy living with us. We'd clean out the extra rooms so you can have your own room and we'd go get all of your stuff from your house. Izuku took his hands off of Katsuki's, putting them up to his face. He started crying. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. He was so happy yet nervous. He would know that he would be safe, wouldn't have a chance of being abused by his parental guardians, but he'd be living with Kaken. The same Kaken that has bullied him relentlessly, the same Kaken that hates him, the same Kaken that saved him and has comforted him these last 2 days. He thought about it for another minute before putting one hand in Masaru's and the other in Mitsuki's. I'd love to stay with you guys. If Kaken is OKW with it. Katsuki tisket and turned his head away from his family and Izuku. I don't really care, as long as you don't bother me all the time. After helping Izuku calm down, Katsuki and Mitsuki made them brunch. They had an American brunch of French toast, eggs, and sausage. They all ate brunch together, joking, and it felt as if the world was right. After they finished brunch, they decided to go collect Izuku's stuff from his house. They brought along bags and boxes, expecting to be bringing a lot home. They were surprised when they walked into his room and saw that all he had was a computer, bed, bookshelf with tons of notebooks on it, and his All Might memorabilia. Wow, Izuku, I was expecting you to have more stuff, Mitsuki said. With all of your fanboying, I thought you'd have more hero stuff than just All Might. I do, Izuku whispered, moving toward his closet. He opened it to show all of the different hero hoodies and shirts. He had mostly All Might, but he had some others. Some of his favorites beside All Might were his Eraserhead. Because nobody really knew of him and it made Izuku feel special. Present Mike, Ectoplasm, Fatgum, Kamui Woods, and Death Arms. Most hero figurines are too expensive for Mom and I now. All of my All Might ones were gifts from you guys or Mom's coworkers. I sold a few of them so I could help pitch in for groceries for a while. Masaru put a gentle hand on Izuku's shoulder. Don't worry, Izuku, we'll take good care of them while packing. Is there anything you want to pack on your own? Izuku nodded. Can I pack my notebooks? I have a lot of information in THHM that most people don't know. Masaru smiled. Of course, I'll start working on your clothes. Sounds good. Izuku nodded and started carefully placing his notebooks in stacks in the box. The four worked in silence for about an hour and a half before they were all done. Katsuki and Masaru started taking the boxes and bags to the car while Izuku looked around the house for a minute, Mitsuki standing with him. Hey, sweetie, Mitsuki said, gaining Izuku's attention. I know you might not want to hear this right now, but I feel it's important to tell you. You will be able to visit Inko if you want, but no one will judge you if you don't want to. But I want you to know, whichever you choose, we'll all be here for you. And please, if you get uncomfortable with something, tell us. I know to you it might eventually feel like I'm trying to replace Inko in your life, but I'm not. I see you as a son, but that doesn't mean you have to see me as a mom. So please, if I get too overbearing or you feel smothered or like I'm overstepping, let me know. I just want you to be comfortable living with us, hun. Izuku looked at Mitsuki for a second before bursting into tears, running into her arms for a hug. Thank you, my Itsuki-san. I promise I don't think that. I know that you just want what's best for me. I'm already so grateful to you for letting me stay with you. Mitsuki hugged Izuku tighter, whispering into his hair, Of course, baby. Just because I'm not Inko doesn't mean I'm not going to care for you. They stayed like that until the boys came to grab them. Izuku was going to leave the house he grew up in, with just his mom, to live with what felt like family. He was walking out the door, ready to leave it all behind when he saw the picture. It was the picture they took a few days after he was declared quirkless. He was dressed in his All Might suit and she was hiding under a blanket, acting trapped. That was the day he decided to be a hero even though he didn't have a quirk. Maybe he wouldn't leave it all behind. He grabbed the photo and put it in his bag before following the Bakugou family out the door. Once they got back to the Bakugou house, Katsuki and Masaru started bringing the bags upstairs, with help this time. They got all the bags into the hallway before they started cleaning out the extra room. It was used as an office and guest bedroom at some point, so there was a bed, nightstand, desk, and bookshelf. There were some photo boxes as well, but they were brought down into the living room. Once they got it all cleaned up, they started unpacking Izuku's stuff. Of course, Izuku put away his notebooks while everyone else just got stuff out of the boxes, letting Izuku choose where to put it. Mitsuki's phone started to ring in the kitchen, so she went down to take the call, Masaru following her as all of the boxes were empty. Katsuki and Izuku were in the room together for a few seconds before Katsuki started to talk. Deku, Katsuki said, getting Izuku to turn around and look at him. I'm sorry for everything. I feel like an ass and I don't want you feeling like you aren't welcome here. I may not like 100% yet, but I still want you to be safe, you know. I mean, we grew up together. If anything happened to you because you didn't stay here, I would feel like shit. Izuku looked shocked for a minute before he started crying. Damn Midoriya's and their tears, Katsuki thought. Katsuki just let Izuku get it out, knowing he needed it. A minute later, Izuku was talking. It's okay, Kaken. Really? Can you do one thing for me though? You don't have to, of course. Just forget it. Never mind. What do you want, dumb nerd? Can you not call me Deku? I'm okay with the stupid things like the dumb nerd and stuff. But Deku kinda hurts. Katsuki made a tisk noise and looked at Izuku. I'll try, but I can't promise that it'll magically disappear. It's more of a habit than a thought. Izuku smiled brightly at him. Thank you, Kaken. Before Katsuki knew it, he was enveloped in a hug by the smaller boy. He didn't want to admit it, but it was really warm and calming to be able to relax around someone he knew would keep everything between the two of them. They sat that way for a minute, neither wanting to move because they were oddly comfortable. Well, they stayed in the hug until they heard footsteps coming upstairs. Once they heard the footsteps, they jumped apart, acting like they were putting things away the whole time. Though it didn't fool the parents because Izuku's face was bright red and Katsuki's had the slightest bit of pink, which is very rare for him to have. They would have teased the boys if they hadn't just gotten the information they got. Mitsuki sat on the bed and motioned for Izuku to sit down next to her. I know you don't want to hear this right now, but you need to. Izuku looked scared as Mitsuki took a deep breath. He was struggling, trying not to pick at his fingers, but he ended up playing with the hem of his shirt. We have to go to the police station. They arrested someone that fit the description of your assaulter, but they need you to come confirm. They asked for us to be there within the hour, so you have a few minutes and the car ride to collect yourself, but we have to leave soon. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Izuku just stared blankly at the wall as Masaru and Mitsuki left the room, motioning Katsuki to follow. Katsuki just shook his head and stayed in the room, leaning against the wall in front of Izuku. Izuku finally looked up from the floor a minute later, eyes brimming with tears. Katsuki pushed himself off the wall and opened his arms, letting Izuku decide if he wanted the touch at that moment. Izuku flung himself into Katsuki's arms, crying harder than he had in days. He didn't know what he was going to do. Was he going to have a panic attack? What if he couldn't even look at her? He could feel his breath speeding up, but he felt Katsuki's hand move up and down his back, admitting heat. It'll be okay. The hag, old man, and I will be there. The weird lie detector guy will be there too. We won't let anything happen to your dumb ass. It's okay. Izuku calmed down, being able to pull away from Katsuki. See, thank why you Kaken. I think I'm okay and now. Katsuki nodded and slightly pushed Izuku forward. Then let's get going, nerd. Can't leave the old man and hag waiting. Izuku giggled but scolded Katsuki for calling his parents names. He followed Katsuki into the car and sat behind the driver. Instead of picking at his fingers, he started shaking his leg, very aggressively. Mitsuki turned around. Izuku, is it okay if I touch your leg? He nodded his head, feeling her hand hit the knee that was bouncing, slowly bringing it to a stop. He wanted to start picking at his fingers, but he knew that wasn't good, so he just played with the hem of his shirt. When he noticed they were pulling up to the station, he started silently freaking out. His vision was getting blurry, but he saw hands in front of them. He was scared, getting ready to get back in the car when he saw the hands turn orange. He realized it was Katsuki and hugged him, burying his face in his chest. He kept mumbling the same thing over and over, though nobody knew what he was saying. The family sat outside the station for a few more minutes, letting Izuku calm down before they went inside. After Izuku calmed down, he admitted that having something to hold grounded him to earth, which is why he has one of Katsuki's hands in his and one of Mitsuki's in the other. He walked into the station, his grip on their hands tightening. Katsuki's tightened as well, helping him feel a little bit better. He let Masaru and Mitsuki do all the talking. He was focused on staying in the moment. Having Katsuki was nice for that, because he kept changing his hand from hot to normal and kept randomly stroking the back of Izuku's, making it easier to focus on since it isn't repetitive. He was led towards a room by a police officer, Detective Tsukachi, and his family next to him. I'm sorry, Midoriya-kun, but you can only bring one person into the observation room. Izuku nodded and grabbed Katsuki's hand tighter, letting Mitsuki's go. He followed the detective and police officer into the room, immediately tensing up when he looked at the glass. Katsuki felt him tense up and slowly moved closer to Izuku, pulling him so he was against his side instead of standing away. Detective Tsukachi looked at the fear in the boy's eyes. Hating this part of the job, Midoriya-kun. I need a verbal confirmation that this is the woman who sexually assaulted you. I will know if you are lying or telling the truth. Midoriya-kun, is this the woman that raped you? Izuku took a shaky breath. Why yes, it is. Okay, Tsukachi said, ushering the boys out of the room. Thank you for your cooperation. If you could please wait in the private waiting room until I'm able to have a chat with you. Officer Sansa will lead you there. The officer led the boys back to Mitsuki and Masaru, then led the family to their private waiting room. The four sat in silence, the look on Izuku's face confirming that it was the woman to the couple. They were furious. How could someone their age hurt someone so young in such a way? Mitsuki wasn't sure she would ever understand it, but all that matters is that Izuku is safe. He's okay now, she keeps reassuring herself. He'll feel better in a bit and he'll be all good. A few minutes later, Tsukachi walked into the private waiting room. He sat down at the table across from Izuku and took a deep breath. "Listen," he said, trying to keep his voice stable. "This isn't news you want to hear, nor news I want to deliver, but you have to be informed, Midoriya-kun. You can choose to tell whomever you like. Would you like for your family to stay in the room for this news, or would you like to hear it alone?" Izuku took a deep breath, thinking, if they all knew they could help him, if they didn't he could fall down a dark path. "I'd rather they stay, please." "Of course," Tsukachi said, "but please remember, you have choices. This isn't easy news to hear or to burden at 15 years old. Izuku took another deep breath and nodded, holding Katsuki's hand even tighter. Tsukachi sighed. "I'm here to inform you that Mayela Aoki is pregnant. I legally have to inform you, as it is her next of kin. My quirk, lie detector, can tell the truth from lies even when the person I'm using it on can't differentiate the two. There is no mistake. But I'm also here to let you know that you have choices. The baby will be born in a hospital, but Aoki-san has been sentenced to 15 years in prison, so she will not be allowed custody of the child unless the child does not have a guardian by the time she has finished her sentence. That being said, you can do a few things. We can put her up for adoption and get her placed in the foster system as soon as she is born. And if we do this, you have a choice to have a relationship with her, but others will be her primary caregivers. You can also choose to not meet her, and none of her foster or adoptive parents will know who you are or your contact information, but there is a chance that once the child is of age it will search for its biological parents. The last option you have is taking care of the child once it's born. You will not be present at the birth, as you are legally not allowed to be, but once the baby is born it will be put in the baby room and then straight into your hands. She will not get a chance to meet Aoki-san unless you choose to let them contact each other once Aoki-san's sentence is over. But you will have sole custody over the child until her sentence is over. Then you can choose if you still want to have sole custody or dual custody. You will be 30 by the time Aoki-san's sentence is over. That leaves you 15 years to settle down with someone. Get a significant other. If that's the case, your significant other can legally adopt the child and be its second parent. But if you choose that and the child wants a relationship with Aoki-san, your significant other must be included in the decision, since they will be a legal guardian of the child. I know this is a lot of information to take in, and I'm sorry for springing it on you, but it's best to know early. Aoki is 6 weeks pregnant, so as of now the due date is in early May. We will contact you with specifics. Please make a choice before the beginning of March, as we may need time to interview possible adoptive and foster parents. I hope everything goes well with the rest of your day. Please contact me if you have any questions." Tsukachi stood up, leaving a folder on the table, bowed to the family, then walked out of the room. Izuku stared at the wall blankly. He didn't know how to react. How do you react when you find out that you are unwillingly having a child? He wanted to cry, but he couldn't. He wanted to scream and shout, but he couldn't. He needed to figure out what he was going to do. Did he want to keep a child he involuntarily helped make? What if the kid turned out quirkless? How would it be treated? Izuku was so lost in thought he didn't notice that he was being led into the car and buckled up. Katsuki was squishing him against the window. He was wondering why when he noticed he was grabbing onto Katsuki's whole arm and not just his hand anymore. He stayed zoned out until they got home. Once they got home, he went to his room. He could hear them all talking to him, but he needed to be alone to think about this. It was a huge decision. He wouldn't call it a burden, but he would be throwing his life away. He would be burdening the Bakugous if anything. First they have to take him in. Then maybe his baby. He couldn't do that to them. He laid in his bed, tired from everything. He didn't remember falling asleep, but that was probably because he was thinking about the whole situation. It was so hard to wrap your head around a situation like that. He awoke to knocking on his door. "Come on in." Masaru opened the door. "Hey bud, dinner's ready. Do you want to eat up here or do you want to join us in the living room?" "Either is fine." Izuku got up. "I'll eat with you guys." Masaru nodded and walked back downstairs. Izuku followed, loving the smell of the homemade curry. He got a plate, considerably less than what everyone else had, and sat down on the floor in front of the couch. Katsuki was sitting on the corner of the couch, Mitsuki cross-legged in the middle, and Masaru at the other end. "Itadakamasu," they all said at the same time, watching the TV while they ate. It was a delicious, relaxing dinner, at least in Izuku's opinion. The only thing he was dreading was school tomorrow. As if Mitsuki could read his mind, she spoke. "I don't want to make you boys go to school tomorrow. We've had a long weekend and I think we could all use a few days off. If you boys are up to it, I'll call you in sick tomorrow and Tuesday and we can just relax at home." Izuku nodded. "I would like that." "Thank you, Mitsuki-san." Dinner was wonderful, but I think I'm going to sit in my room for a bit. I'm glad you liked it, dear. Of course, let me know if you need anything, okay? I'll be up in about an hour to say goodnight. Izuku nodded and headed upstairs, closing his door behind him and sitting at the desk. He needed to do his own research on everything. He started looking up foster systems, how kids are treated. He learned everything his tired brain would take in. He ended up reading stories adults wrote about what it was like growing up in a foster system. He was so lost in the stories that he was startled at the light knock on his door. He checked the time 10. Oh, it's Mitsuki coming to say goodnight. He got up and opened the door. Both Mitsuki and Masaru were standing at the door. Izuku made a motion for them to come inside and they walked in and shut the door. Izuku, sit, Mitsuki said, patting the space between her and Masaru on the bed. He slowly sat between the two, confused. Honey, we wanted to tell you something, Mitsuki started with, turning on the bed to face Izuku. No matter what you choose, we will be okay. I could see the gears in your head earlier. You are not a burden to us. Sure, a baby will be a change, but maybe a good one. We'll be here to help with everything we can. We can watch it and I can teach you some tips and tricks. And don't let Katsuki fool you. He's great with kids. He loves them. We're all willing to help. If anything, you and the baby can share a room, or you and Katsuki. It's up to you. But we also understand if you won't want to keep it. You went through a deeply traumatic experience and many things will serve as a reminder of it, especially the baby. Not only will you have to tell it things one day, it may come out looking more like its mom than you. You still have months to decide. But no matter what you decide to do, we're on your side. She placed her palm on his. We'll always be here for you, Izuku. You've always been family, and this experience doesn't change that fact. Okay. Izuku nodded, hugging Mitsuki, finally letting out his tears. He felt so relieved. He's so scared. He's going to be scared anyway. No matter what he does, he'll be scared for his future, but also for the kids. It's a big decision, and a lot to think about. But he knows people have his back, no matter his choice. They hugged for a while until Mitsuki gave him a kiss on the head and Masaru gave him a hug goodnight. Izuku got in bed, thinking about his decision over and over. He decided he won't choose until February, and it's only October, so he has time. He'll be okay. He woke up to a knock at his door the next day. Izuku, it's time to get up. You may not have to go to school, but I don't want you sleeping all day. Izuku got up and changed into different clothes, opened the door, and greeted Masaru. Masaru smiled at him and moved out of Izuku's way. They started to head downstairs, where Izuku could hear the TV playing. When they made it to the bottom of the stairs, he saw Katsuki sitting on the couch playing a game and Mitsuki making a cup of coffee. Good morning, Izuku. Katsuki turned his head at the sound of Izuku's name and nodded in his direction. Izuku waved to Katsuki, still getting used to not being treated like shit. He waves to Mitsuki and makes himself a bowl of cereal. He was thinking the whole night, not just about the baby situation but also about school. Izuku really didn't want to go back to school. If word gets out about why he's staying with Katsuki, he'd get bullied even more. Even Katsuki might get whispered about. He might not get accepted into any other schools if he transfers though. After all, the only reason he got into Aldera was because his mom had high influence there due to her status as a lawyer. He looked at online schools while living with his mom, as they were cheaper and he wanted to save her money, but then she kicked him out. Izuku debated bringing it up to Mitsuki and Masaru, as they are in charge of him right now. Also, Mitsuki did tell him to let her know if there's anything he wants. He continued eating his breakfast, occasionally glancing at Mitsuki who was sitting diagonally from him. She caught some of his glances, giving him a curious look. Is something wrong, Izuku? She asked, angling her computer screen down. Oh, I know you said to ask you about an FH thing that I might want. I wanted to know if I could go to an online school instead of Aldera. It's just that the kids are really mean and the teachers don't care and I don't want people to find out and start being mean to Kaken too. Izuku's rambling was cut off by Mitsuki. You can do online school, Izuku. Did you have anything specific in mind? Izuku took a deep breath to calm himself down before he started telling Mitsuki about all of the ones he was looking into with Inko. He mentioned something about wanting to do a course more suited to his academic needs, as Aldera teachers were greatly messing with his grades due to his status. Mitsuki easily agreed, telling Izuku to finish his search and to decide on his school while she got things sorted out with Aldera. Izuku hugged Mitsuki, thanking her as much as he could before going to his room to finish his deep dive into the schools he was looking at weeks prior. It had been a few months now. Izuku slowly warmed up to the family. At times Mitsuki and Katsuki were still very brash and loud, scaring Izuku a bit, but Masaru was always there to balance it out. He had been excelling in his schoolwork now that there was no bias towards him. All of his classes were over online videos or Zoom calls with teachers, helping him to trust his teachers more than he did at his other schools. His relationship with Katsuki had gotten better. He no longer called him Deku, but still called him names. Izuku liked to think they were more so terms of endearment than anything. He also started training. after confessing to Katsuki that he had still wanted to be a hero, though in a different light now. Katsuki had insulted him. You can't be a hero looking like that. You have no muscle, no speed, no stamina, no endurance. None of the things that heroes need to be heroes, he recalls being told. Though the next morning he woke up to a note on his desk. The note read a recommended schedule for the green-haired boy to follow, with a small note in the corner. The note in the corner told him that if he missed a day, Katsuki would be coming after him, assuming he's throwing the rare act of kindness out. He had begun bulking up, visible by his loss of baby fat around his face. After Katsuki saw his improvement, they would even spar in the backyard, quirkless of course. Katsuki had belittled him for wanting to still be a hero while being quirkless, but had ended his spiel with a mutter of not getting killed during hero school. All in all, his life was balancing out. Mitsuki was still motherly, treating Izuku as she does her son. Masaru was giving Izuku the male role model he had craved his whole life, even if he was always overcome by his wife and son. And Katsuki was, well, Katsuki. He never let him slack, never allowing him to overexert himself or stay up too late, but he also started being friendlier with Izuku. Now they had bi-monthly movie nights where they strayed from their strict food and training regimes for just the night. The only thing bothering Izuku was if he wanted to keep his soon-to-be daughter, yes daughter. Izuku had requested that Tsukachi keep him updated during Aoki's pregnancy, as he wanted to make sure the baby was healthy but couldn't stand being near the woman. He had been told that she was healthy and developing at a good rate. He had been informed more about his choices by Sansa during a visit at the station, being told that he could name her whether he wanted to keep her or not. But ultimately it was his decision if he wanted foster or adoptive parents to name her if he chose to give her up. He had only 2 more weeks before he had to inform Tsukachi of his choice. Though he was relatively confident he knew what his answer would be. He just had to ask his current guardians if they agreed with his choice. He heard the front door open and, knowing it was Katsuki, walking to his doorway. As soon as Katsuki noticed Izuku watching him, his scowl changed to a confused expression, as Izuku was usually hiding or in the kitchen when he got home. Izuku looked at Katsuki, then at Katsuki's room, something he did when he wanted to talk in private. Katsuki nodded, then disappeared into his room. A minute later he came out in his lounge clothes and waved for Izuku to come into his room. Once the door was closed he went to his speaker and put music on, to make sure the adults in the house weren't secretly listening to their conversation. "What's up, nerd?" Katsuki asked, sitting at his desk chair. I wanted to talk about the baby thing really quickly," Izuku said, rubbing his arms. Katsuki's eyebrows shot up. They hadn't talked about this for a while. Not that it was any of his business. He looked confused at Izuku. Izuku started rushing out his words. "I know this isn't any of your business, but I wanted to ask you about it before I asked your parents. I think I want to keep the baby, but I don't want to both HR you with her because we'll be down the hall and you have school and all that stuff and I don't. But I wanted your opinion on what you think your parents will think because I am scared to ask them because they already have you and me and I don't want to add to their stress." Izuku was cut off by something hitting his head. He saw a pencil in his lap and Katsuki giving him a blank stare. "Listen, you geek. It's up to you if you want to keep your kid. She won't keep me up. I'm a heavy sleeper. The hag and old man will probably be excited for you. Plus, you do school at home so they wouldn't be taking care of her until you go to high school. Even then I doubt they would be annoyed to take care of her. If anything, they'll treat her like she's their granddaughter." Izuku let out the breath he didn't know he was holding. "Okay. Thank you, Kaken. I needed hat." Katsuki just nodded, then pointed at his door. "Now get your broccoli-looking ass out of my room so I can study for the exam tomorrow." Izuku ran out with a meek sorry to Katsuki. With Katsuki's support he decided he would tell his guardians of his decision after dinner. He also decided that he would go to the station and tell Tsukachi his choice the next day. Izuku sat jittery all dinner, easily noticed by the Bakugous. He had been getting better at his jitters and anxiety the past few months. The family decided not to bring it up, giving Izuku a chance to bring it up on his own terms. They had finished dinner smoothly, despite Izuku's constant shaking. Once all the dishes were cleared, Izuku cleared his throat. Mitsuki-san, Masaru-san, may I have a moment?" The adults looked confused at each other but nodded and sat back at the table nonetheless. "So, I know we haven't talked about it much, but I decided what I want to do with my baby." The adults quickly covered up the shock on their faces, and Mitsuki stretching a hand across the table to place over both of Izuku's shaking ones. "Whatever you decide, we will 100% support you, Izuku. We promise." Izuku swallowed past the lump in his throat. I want to keep her. I know she'll be a lot going into high school and all of that, but I don't want to be worried about her all the time. She has a 50% chance of being quirkless, and I feel wrong throwing her into a world with people who may hurt her for that. I really feel passionate about this and I was hoping to go tell Tsukachi-san tomorrow. The two adults looked at him, Mitsuki tearing up. He was afraid he said something wrong and was about to apologize when he felt arms wrap around him. "Oh, Izuku," Mitsuki whispered in his hair, "I'm so glad you made your decision. We can go with you to tell Tsukachi if you wish, and on set we can go out and start looking for things for her. Talk to Katsuki. Figure out if you guys are gonna share his room or you and the baby are going to." At Mitsuki's soft smile and Masaru's hand ruffling his hair, Izuku felt all of the stress melt away. Logically, he knew they would be happy for him either way, but he was still scared that they would kick him out just as his mother had. He cried tears of relief, agreeing with Mitsuki and getting ready to talk to Katsuki and go to bed. As he walked upstairs, he could hear his guardians talk about how proud they were that he chose to keep her, and that he'd be a wonderful father despite not planning to be one so young, if at all. Once he was upstairs, he knocked on Katsuki's door. Catch Han. Your mom told me to come talk to you about the rooms and stuff." Katsuki opened his door wordlessly, knowing Izuku would know that it was answer enough. Izuku sat himself on Katsuki's bed, watching him put his clothes away. "So, they were excited, weren't they?" Izuku gave a sheepish smile. "Yeah, I heard them talking about it on my way up here." Katsuki scoffed. "I told you. I wouldn't lie to you about something like this, you dumb fuck." Izuku let out a small chuckle. "Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, your mom wanted me to ask you about the rooms. I'm fine with sharing the smaller room with her, at least until she starts getting bigger. If you want to keep your room, that's fine, it doesn't bother me at all." Katsuki stayed silent for a bit, seemingly weighing his options. He sighed after a minute. "You can keep her with you for a bit, if that's cool. I don't want to have to move all of your shit in here just for it not to fit. Like you said, we can do that until she starts getting bigger. Then you can move into here with me and we can let her have that room to herself." Izuku just nodded. He stayed silent on the bed for a while. Hey Kaken." Katsuki made an affirmative noise, telling Izuku to continue talking. I just wanted to say thank you. If you hadn't made me come here, who knows where I could be right now. And really, I know you've been really supportive too. I just wanted to let you know that. Even if you end up not liking her or me, thank you for giving me this opportunity." Katsuki turned to see tears not yet fallen in Izuku's eyes. He sat on the bed and bumped shoulders with the kid. "To be honest, I didn't bring you here because the hag would have killed me if I didn't, at least, not entirely. I noticed your behavior changed and I was scared. I didn't know what it meant. I thought me and all the assholes were driving you off and you would never come back. I really just wanted to make sure that you would give me a chance to apologize. I know it doesn't make up for everything, but I only did what I did because I didn't want you to be a hero. I was scared that you'd try and get hurt or worse." Izuku looked at Katsuki, soft smile on his face. "I kind of figured, Kaken. Your little notes and stuff helped a bit. But thank you, seriously, you have no idea what all this support means to me right now." Katsuki nodded, staring at the floor. He felt Izuku lean on him and couldn't help leaning back into him as well, thanking whatever was out there that Izuku didn't end up hurting himself or worse. A few minutes later, Katsuki shooed Izuku away. "Because you need to get your sleep before you kid takes it all away." Izuku smiled fondly and whispered a goodnight to Katsuki before leaving for his room. The next morning, before Izuku did anything, he went to the police station, just to make sure he didn't forget to. He walked in, the receptionist looking at him. "Hello, how may I help you?" Izuku shyly waved. "Is Detective Tsukachi liable? If he isn't, can you see if Officer Sansa is?" The receptionist nodded and made a few calls, leaving Izuku standing awkwardly in the room. She put her phone down and beamed at the boy. "Detective Tsukachi is available. He's in his office, the third one on the left side of this hallway." Izuku thanked the lady and headed down the hallway, knocking on Tsukachi's office door when he got there. He looked up from his desk, surprised to see Midoriya. "Hello, Midoriya-san. I wasn't expecting you to visit today," Tsukachi said as he waved Izuku to come in. Izuku gave a shy smile, making his way to the seat across from the detective. "I know, but I decided to come tell you instead of waiting a minute for your call." Izuku took a deep breath, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "I decided that I'm going to keep the baby that Aoki-san is going to have. I don't want to be there for her birth, but I would love to see her as soon as I can after that." Tsukachi looked shocked at the abundance of information, though he quickly recovered and wrote something down on a piece of paper. "That's truly amazing, Midoriya-kun. I will be sure to inform the hospital staff as well as Aoki's guards. Would you like for me to give the hospital your phone number or the Bakugous to call once she is here?" Izuku gave Tsukachi his phone number, thanking him and bowing before leaving. Though as he left he saw a man in all black with long hair standing outside the office, raising an eyebrow at him. Izuku politely waved to the man, making his way back to the Bakugou household. He got back to the house, immediately immersing himself in his school work. He hadn't realized how much time had passed until he was called for dinner. He talked with the family about his exchange with the detective, and brought up the fact that his applications for high schools would be coming in the mail soon. The house was filled with happy laughter and easy conversation for the rest of the night, a good shift from how their first dinner went. Izuku had spent some of the night looking at things he could get for his baby, excited yet nervous that she would be here in just a short 3 months. He went to sleep with a smile on his face, thinking of his soon-to-be daughter. Before Izuku knew it, his daughter was here. He was just setting up her crib and baby monitor when his phone rang. He saw an unknown number and answered, clicking the speaker button before placing his phone on his desk. Hello, Midoriya. Izuku speaking. Hello Midoriya-san, this is Mio from Musutafu General Hospital. I'm calling on behalf of Itsukachi-san to inform you that Aoki Mayela has given birth. You're allowed to bring up to 3 people with you. When you get here, come up to the 3rd floor and give the receptionist your name. Have a great day, Midoriya-san. Izuku heard the line click, taking a second for the words to register before jumping up and running downstairs, basically screaming to his new family that they have to get to the hospital. He shook the entire ride to the hospital, from excitement or nerves he didn't know, but he was ready to meet his daughter. Oi, nerd, Katsuki called from beside him, stop shaking. You're shaking the whole fucking car. Sorry, Kaken, but I'm so nervous. I don't know what to name her. Will she look like me? I don't know what to do. Katsuki gave Izuku a blank stare before throwing his hand onto the green-haired man's lap, heating it up until he noticed. Once Izuku noticed, he grabbed the hand, giving a shy smile as he played with the blonde's fingers. Izuku practically jumped out of the car when Mitsuki parked. She locked the doors before he could though, turning around in her seat. Izuku, she said in a stern voice, gaining his attention, I know you're excited and scared, but calm down, it's going to be fine. Would you like me and Masaru to come in with you, or are you okay with Katsuki? Izuku thought about it. Everyone, please, he stated, finally calm. And Mitsuki nodded and told him to remain calm as they walked through the hospital. He nodded and stayed calm until they got to the 3rd floor. When the elevator door opened, he practically dragged Katsuki with him, still playing with his hand. The receptionist smiled at him. How can I help you today, sir? I'm Midoriya Izuku, he said, practically vibrating from nerves. The receptionist typed something into her computer before looking back up to the small family. She'll be in the viewing room. If you go down the hall to your right, there will be a big window. She'll be in there. After a few minutes, a nurse should come find you about signing the birth certificate and naming and all that fun stuff. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Izuku said something back, then left to the window, again dragging Katsuki behind him. He got to the window and stopped in his tracks. He immediately knew who she was, the bright green eyes a giveaway. Kaken, he whispered, wrapping himself completely around Katsuki's arm and pulling his other hand up to his face. She's so beautiful. He stood there in shock, seeing his daughter had made everything that happened much more real, but he couldn't bring himself to be angry about it. He wanted to cry, though he didn't know what the reason was. He felt a hand on his shoulder and then came back to reality. He looked over his shoulder to see Mitsuki standing behind him, a soft smile on her face. Izuku admired her for another minute before a nurse came over to him to fill out some forms, the first being her birth certificate. He didn't know what to name her. He was so focused on making everything perfect that he forgot. He looked back at his daughter, then wrote on the paper. He finished all of the paperwork, the nurses giving him everything he would need when he was brought into the back of the room. The nurses taught him how to swaddle and hold her properly before giving her to him. Izuku looked down at his daughter, happy tears finally falling. Hi Ikika, he said, holding her close to his face. Welcome to the world, he said before kissing her forehead and walking back to the Bakugous. He walked over to them, carefully watching his steps. Once he got in front of them, he smiled up at them. They walked to the car in silence, Izuku walking slower and more careful than the others. Once they got to the car, Mitsuki showed him how to put her in the car seat and make sure it's secure. He followed her instructions and spent the whole car ride staring at her in awe. Once they got back home, he carefully picked her up and walked in with her, placing her in a rocker they had in the living room for her. Once he put her down, he sat on the couch, curling into a ball and watching her. He was so mesmerized, but the spell was broken when someone walked in front of him. He looked next to him and realized that everyone was sitting in the living room, admiring at her. So, Mitsuki whispered, breaking the silence, what did you name her? Ikika, he whispered. Everyone was confused, so he explained, written as a flower, I don't know why, it just felt right. Mitsuki nodded as Masaru spoke. I think her name is beautiful, Izuku, just as much as she is. Izuku nodded, leaning his head against the coach. He hadn't realized how long they had been at the hospital for until just now. Seeing him yawn, Mitsuki got up, dragging Masaru behind her, presumably to make a late dinner or go to bed. Izuku just watched them pass him, not saying anything. After a few minutes of sitting in silence with Katsuki, he heard his daughter's name fall from his lips. The old man was right, Katsuki said, surprisingly softly. Her name is as beautiful as she is. Izuku looked at Katsuki and let his head fall onto his shoulder. It was quiet again for a while until Izuku said, I'm scared, Kaken. Katsuki let out a hum, facing Izuku to tell him he had the attention of the blonde. Izuku sighed, about to start crying. What if she looks more like Aoki than me? I don't know what I'd do. I mean, of course I wouldn't leave her alone. I'd still take care of her, but what if she knows? What if she finds out and hates herself because I wasn't willing? What if she thinks I didn't want her? What if she's quirkless? We both know how she could get treated. Kaken. What if something happens and she doesn't tell me or she takes matters into her own hands? I don't know what I'd do if I lost her. Kaken. Katsuki just let Izuku rant, listening to his worries. Katsuki slowly guided Izuku's head to his shoulder, wrapping an arm around Izuku's back. She'll be okay, Izuku. She's got you. There won't be a second in the world where this girl thinks or feels she's unloved. Not between you or mom or dad. Nobody would let that happen. If she finds out what happened, I'm sure you would shut her thoughts down right away. You're too kind to let her think any less of herself than you would. Izuku just nodded into Katsuki's shoulder, feeling himself getting tired. He tried to get up so he could go lay in his bed. But Katsuki wouldn't let him up. Izuku kept trying to get up but kept getting pushed back into place. Eventually, he gave up and stayed on Katsuki's shoulder. The way he was hunched over was uncomfortable, but the warm hands on his back and in his hair made him more tired. Izuku woke up to crying. He was confused, until he remembered that they picked Ikika up the day before. He tried to get up, but felt his bed move. Wait, what? He woke himself up some more and noticed that he was laying on top of Katsuki, not his bed. He blushed but got up anyway, picking Ikika up and out of her crib. He walked around with her for a bit, but it didn't help. He checked if she needed her diaper changed, but she didn't. He went into the kitchen to make her a bottle, reading the directions on the formula container. He was trying to open the lid with Ikika in his other arm when he felt something behind him. Before he could react, the formula lid was opened and the container was moved out of Izuku's way. He looked next to him to see Katsuki scooping some of the powder into a bottle. Izuku murmured a thanks while he measured out the water he needed to add to the bottle. Izuku was opening the microwave to warm it up when the bottle was grabbed out of his hands and he saw Katsuki standing with his hands slightly glowing red. Izuku smiled and thanked him again before he was handed the bottle. Katsuki just grunted before walking back into the living room, motioning Izuku to follow him. Just as Izuku sat down, Katsuki put on a show and laid across the couch, feet by Izuku and head by the baby rocker. The two spent the half hour that she was eating in silence, watching some comedy show about cops. After the bottle was empty, Izuku went to put it away. Just as he was getting up, he felt Katsuki tug his shirt. He looked back and saw Katsuki going to grab Ikika. Izuku gave her to him and went to put the bottle in the sink. The rest of the night went similarly. The boys falling asleep, Izuku waking up to crying, Katsuki waking up to a lack of heat, taking care of the baby, then laying down again. Izuku smiled as he fell asleep again, thinking that maybe raising this baby wouldn't be as hard as he thought. Ikika had been in their lives for 1 month already, and it all went by so fast. Katsuki had to leave to take Yui's entrance exam. Katsuki had almost been late, as he had been hesitant to leave Ikika's side. He had taken up an almost fatherly role for the girl, just as Izuku had. Though, being Izuku's former best friend/bully thing, Katsuki wasn't sure why Izuku let him help with the girl. He had bullied Izuku relentlessly when they found out that he didn't have a quirk, so why let him take care of a baby when she could end up quirkless too? Not that he would hurt her. Kami. He didn't think he'd be able to be nice to someone if they hurt the girl when she was older, much less hurt her himself. But still, why would Izuku let him help when he could have just kept her in his room or made Katsuki stay away from her? He didn't notice how long he'd been zoned out for until he felt himself falling towards the ground. He grimaced and prepared to hit the floor when, suddenly, he was floating. He looked to see a girl with prominent pink circles on her cheeks apologizing about using her quirk on him without permission. Izuku was exhausted. Ikika had been a wonderful baby, but it was still so tiring to be up all night taking care of the angel. She had developed a habit of sleeping for most of the day, no matter how much they tried to keep her awake, and waking up every other hour of the night, begging for attention. He had been working on an email for a high school. Mitsuki and Masaru agreed to let him do high school online. When he heard his name called, "Izuku, come downstairs for a second please," he heard Mitsuki's voice. He walked downstairs to see Mitsuki by the door, holding a bag. "Yes, Mitsuki-san." She sighed. "One of my managers called. He needs someone on site to help alter the clothes to fit the model better. I need to know. I'm so sorry but I can't bring Ikika. I can help you with her tonight if you need it." Izuku shook his head. "Don't worry about it, Mitsuki-san. I signed up to be her full-time guardian and you have done more than enough, taking care of her during the day. Go to work. Don't want to keep your model waiting." Mitsuki shook her head at the boy's antics, giving him a hug before saying goodbye and making her way to the train station. Izuku sighed as she left, not excited to finish applications in the living room. Just as he went upstairs to grab his laptop, his phone went off, a notification from his baby monitor app. Izuku grabbed his laptop and rushed downstairs to get to the baby. Hey, it's okay baby. Papa's here, it's okay." Ikika seemed to relax at the sound of her father's voice, leaning into his chest. Izuku sighed and sat down, holding her on his lap as he tried to log back into his laptop. Now to finish filling out these applications and entrance exams. Katsuki sighed, cracking his knuckles. Those kids had been so fucking stupid. So what if Izuku was right and they had rescue points up for grabs? None of those fucking kids would make it in the hero world if he had to save half of their asses. Okay, so he was trusting Izuku with his life right now, knowing that if they had rescue points he definitely got more of those than of actual attack points. But, honest to fucking Kami, he had saved the asses of majority of the kids in the exam area, keeping them away from robot pieces and broken buildings. He had no clue how the heroes were going to be able to pick 40 students from all of those failures. He was almost 100% positive that he was going to be in the top 10 though, having sprained his wrist with the big-ass explosion he used to take down the giant zero-pointer. Katsuki was ready to go home, change, and take a nap with his baby girl. Katsuki was expecting his mother to yell at him for slamming the door open, but no yelling came. He was ready to yell through the home when he noticed that there was no crying. He walked into the living room, just to be stopped in his tracks. Izuku was sitting on the couch, laptop slipping out of his fingers, with Ikika sitting on his lap and leaning her head on his chest. Katsuki wasn't stopped because of the position. That was normal, but something about it this time felt different. With the way they were sitting, you could see all of the freckles on Izuku's face and neck, even the ones that he didn't know were there more than a few weeks ago. Katsuki allowed himself to bask in the feeling of difference until he heard a noise. He looked down at Izuku's chest to see that Ikika was starting to stir, seemingly not liking the feeling of eyes on her without attention. She looked like she was ready to start crying as loud as possible, at least until she felt his hand on her back. Seemingly satisfied, she slowly went to lay back down but got upset when Katsuki's hand had moved. Katsuki wasn't about to let her wake up the nerd by screaming just because she wasn't getting the attention she wanted. He slowly went to grab her, trying his best not to wake Izuku up at the same time. Once he had her in his arms, he grabbed Izuku's laptop, closing it and placing it on the coffee table. He grabbed the blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over the boy, being careful to not wake him up. Izuku was confused. Where did Ikika go? He remembered falling asleep with her on his lap. Where did she go? Izuku was about to jump up and freak out when he noticed he was warm. Where did the blanket come from? He was the only one home with Ikika, unless it had gotten really late. He moved the blanket from over him and went to go look in the kitchen for his daughter when he heard her giggles. He turned around to see her on the floor with Katsuki, laying on her back with him tickling and talking to her. Kakin, when did you get home? Katsuki didn't even jump when he heard his voice, most likely hearing him as he shuffled the blanket off. I got home around 12. I walked in and saw you guys sleeping. I was just gonna let you guys sleep, but she was getting fussy. Figured you could use the sleep. Izuku nodded dumbly, not knowing what to do. Should he sit and watch? Or should he go find something to do in the kitchen? Boy, nerd, Katsuki said, gaining Izuku's attention. Go get her a bottle. I'll warm it up when you bring it back in here. Izuku nodded, even if Katsuki couldn't see it, and went to the kitchen to get everything prepared. He went back into the living room a few minutes later to see that Ikika was now lying on her back on her playmat, Katsuki taking a seat on the couch. He reached his arm out, not even looking back to see if Izuku was directly there. He took the bottle when it was placed in his hand and patted for Izuku to sit next to him on the couch. Before I put your laptop on the coffee table earlier, I saw that you were filling out applications for high schools. You should make sure you got them all sent out before you fell asleep. Izuku nodded numbly, not used to the not rudeness from Katsuki. Sure, Katsuki had been nicer lately, at least on the Katsuki level, but it was still weird to have it directed towards him. He grabbed his laptop and was going back over all of his applications and emails to make sure they were submitted. In his peripheral vision, he saw Katsuki pick Ikika up, holding her gently as he held the bottle to her mouth. He's so gentle with her, he thought, not knowing that this was the moment when his life got flipped upside down again. It was July now, a few days after Izuku's birthday. He had an amazing birthday, spending it inside with his daughter and his friend, bully, not friend thing. It was surreal to realize that he was 15 with a 2-month-old daughter. He was still trying to figure out how to balance his life all the way. He was more excited for today though, as it was the day that both Izuku's and Katsuki's entrance exam results came in. He was practically vibrating with excitement at this point, not touching his laptop until Katsuki was able to grab his letter from the mailman. Mitsuki and Masaru sat on the floor, Ikika laying on her playmat beside the latter. They looked at both boys with pride, already feeling that they had passed their exams. The boys walked back into the room, a letter in Katsuki's hand this time. Izuku was vibrating with excitement as they sat down on the couch. Katsuki nodded his head towards Izuku's laptop, telling him to check his results first. Izuku took a deep breath and grabbed his laptop with shaky hands. He clicks around for a second before he stares at his screen, mouth agape. Upon hearing his name called, he looked up, seeing concerned looks on the Bakugo's faces. Sorry, I just can't believe it. I got a 100% on my exam. I'm in. I got in. Izuku's sudden excitement made Ikuka jump and start crying. He ran to her, picking her up and whispering sweet nothings in her ear to get her to calm down. But, oh my kami, he had just gotten into one of the most prestigious schools, known for the fact that their students were usually the reason Japan's academic scores were so high. He would literally be jumping for joy if he didn't have an angel in his arms. He calmed himself down and sat back down next to Katsuki. Okay, I am done now. Your turn, catch H. Han. Katsuki nodded, slowly ripping the envelope open, just for a silver disc to fall out and onto the table. They watched the disc for a second before a projection of All Might pop up, causing Izuku to jump. He still wasn't over what All Might said. But it was okay, because he would never see the hero again. He watched as the projection talked, barely able to decipher what any of the words meant as he tried to slow his breathing down. He had been able to calm down enough to hear the "Congratulations, Bakugou Shonen. Welcome to your hero academia." They all paused, waiting for another surprise from the projection, but one never came. Katsuki, congrats. First place in the physical exam. There's my damn kids, Mitsuki exclaimed, grabbing Katsuki and giving him a smack on the back. Izuku beamed up at Katsuki from his seat. Yeah, Kaken. I knew you could do it. Izuku thought he saw a tint of pink on Katsuki's cheeks, but maybe he was imagining it because it was gone in a flash. He went to give Katsuki a hug, pushing Ikuka so she was sitting on his hip. Katsuki noticed and let Izuku hug him as tight as he could. The makeshift family spent the rest of the night enjoying the happy air, not having a worry at all, at least for a good while. Their mini party, which was just take out and movies all night, was interrupted when Masaru's phone went off. Masaru excused himself and brought his phone to him in his wife's room. He stayed in the room for a few minutes before walking back out to the living room. He sent a glance to the boys before calling Mitsuki over to the kitchen with him. They stayed in the kitchen, talking in hushed voices for a few minutes before walking back into the living room. They looked nervous as they walked back in, almost as if they didn't want to tell the boys what was happening. Boys, sit down, Mitsuki said, unusually calm. We need to talk. The boys, namely Izuku, got scared at the words. He tensed up and the adults noticed. You're not in trouble. It's more so about us, not you. You're okay, Izuku. Nothing's going to happen. Izuku took a deep breath and calmed down as he sat next to Katsuki on the couch again. He nodded, inviting the adults to continue talking. Masaru sighed. I just got a call from work, asking us if we were available for traveling at the moment. As you know, with you and Ikuka here, Izuku, we're hesitant about leaving. Not because we don't trust you, but because we promised to help you take care of her and you until you're older. Izuku nodded, not knowing how to respond. Thankfully, Katsuki answered, So, do you need to travel? Aren't you just gonna have to go a few towns away? Mitsuki sighed. You see, Katsuki, right now they need more people in America. They're asking your father and I to go, as we had spent around 6 months there before you were born, so we know the language better than most employees. If you guys will need us here, we'll stay. Izuku shook his head. I don't speak for Kaken, but I'll be okay if you guys go. After all, I'm home during the day so I'll be able to be there for her 24/7. It's not that I don't appreciate your guys' help, it's wonderful, but I'll be able to handle her. She's my daughter after all. Mitsuki and Masaru nodded, looking at Katsuki for his answer. I don't care what you do. It'll be pretty much the same as if you guys are here anyway. If you were to stay home, you would just stay holed up in your room and up all night on calls. Plus, you don't need to worry about Ikuka and the nerd. I'll be here. Mitsuki and Masaru nodded. Thank you for being honest with us, Masaru said. I'll call the company and find out the schedule for when we leave and come back. But don't be afraid to call if anything happens, even if it's the middle of the night there. Okay. After getting affirmative answers from the boys, Masaru got up. He said goodnight to the boys and Ikuka before pulling his phone out and walking towards his room. Mitsuki mirrored the actions, giving the 3 kids a kiss on the forehead before following after her husband. It was officially the first day of school. Izuku was excited for Katsuki, but Katsuki was not. They had gotten closer during the last month, Mitsuki and Masaru leaving a few days after the acceptance letters had come in. Are you sure you're okay? I can come home at lunch. We live close enough to the school for it. Text me if you need anything. And remember, test her milk on your forearm before you. Kaken, Izuku said coolly, smoothing out the sides of Katsuki's UE uniform. I'll be fine. I know how to take care of my own daughter. Now, get out of here or you'll be later than you're already going to be. Katsuki nodded, squeezing Izuku's hand as he left the door. Bye, Izuku. Text if you need anything. Izuku shook his head as he kicked Katsuki out of the house. Honestly, he never thought he would be joking with Kaken, much less kicking him out of his own house. Izuku was shaken from his train of thought as he heard Ikuka start fussing. He could feel that his cheeks were heated, though he assumed it was just from the sudden change from the windy air outside and the heat from inside the house. He made his way to the living room where she was lying in her crib. He picked her up. "Good morning, my love." He walked around the house with her, as she was usually just fussy when she wanted attention. He realized that he should probably get a baby holder, one of the chest ones, so he didn't have to make his arms sore quickly. He looked at his phone. It would probably be around 9 or 10 in America right now. He sent a text to Mitsuki, asking her if she agreed. She called him and told him which kind to look for and which brands are good and which to stay away from. He talked with her as he unlocked and unfolded Ikika's stroller, getting ready to go out. He was about to put her in the crib when he got a notification. He checked and saw that Mitsuki had transferred money into the bank account that they had set up for him, as Katsuki already had one. "Mitsuki-san, that really isn't necessary. I have enough in my account to get a carrier and much more." Mitsuki laughed. "No, Izuku, you deserve it anyway. I'm not there to go out with you and help you more. This is the least I can do from halfway across the world. Make sure to text Katsuki though. He would freak out if he didn't get any notifications of your presence in the house." Izuku laughed and placed Ikika in her stroller, giving her some toys and clipping a pacifier to her sleeve. He hung up his call with Mitsuki before texting Katsuki that he was going out with Ikika to pick something up. Katsuki paused outside of his classroom as his phone went off in his pocket. He saw that Izuku texted him, letting him know he was taking Ikika out. He was about to reply, something about making sure that Izuku turned his location services on, when he felt eyes on him. He was used to the feeling, though usually they felt like a soft stare, as the eyes were usually Izuku's doe eyes or Ikika's curious ones. This feeling was uncomfortable, the hairs on his neck standing up. He turned around just to see a fucking giant caterpillar. What the fuck? The caterpillar stood up. They weren't supposed to do that, right? Something had started zipping down the middle of the fucking thing, almost making him jump again. He calmed down when he saw a man step out. He stared at the man, giving him an up and down, before his eyes landed on the goggles. The yellow goggles hanging off the guy's shoulders. Katsuki's eyes widened and he snorted, "Got him it. Izuku was right. Thanks, old man. Now I owe Izuku Katsuden." Katsuki turned around without further explanation and sat down at his desk, going straight back to whatever he was doing before on his phone. Shouta shook off the strange reaction, slipping into the room unnoticed. Katsuki glanced at the man again, grinning as he went back to his phone. Shouta, again, shook off the strange reaction and went to stand at the podium in the front of the classroom. As more people noticed him, the class slowly became quieter, and they all sat down, ready to pay attention. Well, all except for the kid in front who hasn't put his phone down since he walked in. He looked at his seating chart. Bakugou Katsuki, the chart supplied. "Bakugou, phone away, class is starting." The boy looked up with a glare before tapping his screen one more time as he turned the phone off and put it away. Shouta looked around the classroom, noting the new faces that actually seemed promising this year. "Good. Now, it took you all 8 minutes before noticing my presence, with the exception of Bakugou. That will not fly in this classroom. You need to always be on guard. Villains won't wait for you to notice them before they attack. Most rely on your element of surprise." He gauged the reactions of the students, trying to find who looked less determined after his spiel. "Good. Now," he threw a bag at the podium. "Find one of your size and meet me at the field in the back of the school." He walked out of the room, ignoring all of the irritated and confused voices of his students. Izuku didn't know how to feel. He had found a carrier, that wasn't a problem, but the looks he was getting were. Sure, he got looks when he and Ikika went out with Masaru or Mitsuki, but people just assumed he was the big brother, as he looked way too young to be a father. But, being out by himself with her, he felt very unsafe, especially with the way that some of the patrons in the store stared at him as he waited in line. He knew that he was safe, realistically, but there was a part of him that didn't believe it. After all, he felt safe at home, and look where that got him. His anxiety was slowly growing worse and he couldn't help but reach for his phone. He dialed Katsuki's number before he could think too much into it. It rang for a moment until there was a voice at the other end of the line. "Hello," a gruff voice answered, but it didn't sound like Katsuki's. Hi." Izuku checked to make sure he had the right number. He did. So who in the hell was answering Kaken's phone? Izuku's anxiety just got worse from that. Is Kaken around?" I need to talk to him. Please." Izuku heard a huff and the voice replied again. "1 second. He's working on a quirk assessment at the moment." Izuku weakly let out an okay before he was forced to walk forward in line. He heard rustling on the other side of the phone for a second, and then the voice spoke again. "Bakugou, someone is on the phone for you." He started biting at his nails, waiting for Kaken's voice to come through the speakers. "Izuku, what's up? Did something happen?" Katsuki pounded him with questions, sounding out of breath. Izuku put his phone to his shoulder as he grabbed a new container of powdered formula. "Nothing's wrong. I just got scared. People were giving me looks and I felt unsafe. Do you think we could stay on the phone for a bit, even if we aren't talking?" Katsuki didn't say anything for a second, but there was muffled talking on the other end of the phone. After a minute he got a response. Yeah, the hobo said it's fine. As long as you don't bother me during class. Izuku nodded. Okay, I can do that. The man that answered, he said you were doing a quirk assessment? What's that about? Izuku made it to the cashier, ringing up all of his stuff. Thankfully, she didn't give him any dirty looks, just one of sympathy. Katsuki took a deep breath. Yeah, this fucking hobo decided that we would be doing a beginning of the year assessment of our quirks just to see how they grow. He threatened that the person in last place would be expelled. Izuku gasped, trying to put the bag on the stroller with the diaper bag. He threatened expulsion for an assessment. That doesn't sound right. Katsuki shrugged. I don't fucking know what the guy is thinking. He literally showed up in front of the classroom door in a bright yellow obnoxious sleeping bag. I thought he was some kind of giant bug or some shit. Izuku started laughing. Of course you would think that, Kaken. Also, you keep calling him a hobo. What's it for? Izuku unlocked the stroller's wheels, making his way down the street with Ikika. She just babbled, reaching to every person she saw, leaving Izuku to give a meek, apologetic smile to each one. Oh, I didn't tell you. Eraserhead works at Yui, Izuku. You were right, he's my homeroom teacher. The hobo, Izuku could feel the smirk in his voice. Izuku started to mumble, oh my kami, Eraserhead is your teacher. You're so lucky, Kaken. I wish I was able to meet him, much less be taught by him. You have to ask him questions about his quirk for me. Do you think his hair floating is another quirk? Or do you think it's an extension of Eraser? The same with his eyes. Do you think that the red glowing is caused by a separate quirk or just an extension? If the hair thing is another quirk, does it just make his hair float up with anti-gravity, or does it make it so his hair is just out of his eyes? It'd be so cool to see him in action. We're gonna have a conversation about this when you get home. Kaken. Izuku waited for an answer. Kaken usually interrupts his rants or at least hums in agreement. Well, recently he has. The lack of answer was making him anxious, even if he felt safer and was pretty close to home now. Kid, the gruff voice from earlier said. You done? Izuku froze. Oh, I am sorry, sir. I thought it was Kaken. Where is he exactly? There was a noise and a shout before the voice answered. Bakugou had to go change. There's a no-phone policy in the locker rooms. But he was insistent in not wanting to hang up with you. Izuku turned bright red. Oh, I'm sorry you had to hear me mutter like that. You can just let Kaken know that I'm home now, so everything's good. The man huffed. That would be illogical. He would just call you back or text you during class to confirm that you're safe. Also, the theories surrounding my hair or eyes are good. I don't know why my eyes glow. It's annoying. It makes it harder to hide whose quirk I'm erasing. My hair stays out of my face, so it isn't an anti-gravity thing. Those were some pretty thorough analyses and theories for an underground hero. I'm impressed. Izuku turned bright red. Oh, Eraserhead, sir. I'm sorry. It's kinda creepy. I know. I'm very interested in HHH heroes and quirks and stuff. Sorry if I creeped you out. Is Kaken back yet? The man, Eraserhead, gave a small chuckle. You'd be a pretty good analyst if you really wanted to, kid. Thanks for the ideas. Izuku was about to answer when he heard Kaken's voice. Are you okay, nerd? Sorry to leave you alone with the hobo. Needed to get out of that stupid gym uniform. Katsuki pulled his phone away from his ear the second he heard Izuku's raised voice. Kaken, you left me alone with Eraserhead, just as I went on a rant about Eraserhead's quirk and theories. You are so mean. You could have at least warned me first. Katsuki grimaced. Yeah, sorry, my bad, Izukus. Are you good now though? He heard Izuku huff. Yes, we're home now, but I'm still upset with you. Katsuki gave a small chuckle. Yeah, whatever. See you when I get home, a dork. Izuku said goodbye before hanging up and taking Ikika to the living room. He placed her in her crib as he unboxed the chest carrier, teaching himself how to adjust the straps. Just as he got the carrier off, there was a knock at the door. Izuku checked the peephole before opening the door. Hello. How may I help you today, Tsukachi-san? Tsukachi smiled at Izuku. Hi, Midoriya-kun. I just came by to check on you. Would you mind if I came in? Izuku shook his head, stepping back to let the detective in the house. How have you been, Tsukachi-san? Tsukachi walked in, carefully taking his shoes off. I've been well. Yourself? Izuku grabbed him a pair of guest slippers from the closet next to the door. I've been good. It's been kind of stressful with Ika, but it's going pretty well. Tsukachi nodded. That's good. To be honest, Midoriya-kun, I wasn't expecting to find you home at this hour. I was expecting to run into one of the Bakugous. Izuku nodded, leading Tsukachi to the kitchen. Oh, yeah. That doesn't make sense if you don't know had I do school at home. School seemed too stressful to go back to after the incident. Mitsuki-san allowed me to do school virtually, as it's easier for me. Tsukachi nodded. I was hoping to also chat with one of the Bakugous while I'm here. Is that possible? Izuku grimaced and took a breath. Actually Tsukachi-san, Mitsuki and Masaru-san are out of town at the moment. Their work required them to go to America for a few months. So they're there right now. If Tsukachi didn't like that idea, it didn't show on his face. That's fine, I'll correlate with them on their current time zone. How's the baby, Ikika? You said her name was? Izuku nodded. Yep, she's good. She's growing at a healthy rate and I get a lot of help when everyone is home. Even if Kaken doesn't seem like he'd be good with kids, he is. He warms up her bottles for me with his quirk when it's really late. And he takes care of her while I sleep if I seem too tired to. Tsukachi nodded, a small smile on his face. That's great, Midoriya-san. I'm happy to hear that you're doing well. I hope things continue to go well for you. I have to take my leave now, as I have a meeting to attend. Please contact me if you need anything, as you have my number. Goodbye, Midoriya-san. Izuku said goodbye and closed the door behind Tsukachi, sighing as it woke Ikika up. Tsukachi met up with Eraserhead after his check-in with Midoriya, as requested. He was honestly very happy that Izuku was doing well. He looked much better than he had when they first met. He had put on more muscle as well as become more lean. He had a happier aura and a more natural color to his skin. Tsukachi still had a slight smile on his face as he walked into his office, seeing Aizawa sitting in one of the chairs on the other side of his desk. Eraser, he said, nodding and greeting. What was the cause for an emergency meeting? Aizawa sighed. There's a new problem child and he's not one in my class. Izuku had a bad feeling. He didn't know why though. Ikika had been sleeping well. Katsuki had been as nice as he has been lately. There was no news of anything bad happening in America. So why did he feel like this? Why did he feel like everything was about to come crumbling down? Izuku didn't notice he was mumbling until he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked up to see Katsuki. Katsuki gives him a hard look. Why the fuck are you mumbling at? He checks a nearby clock, 7 in the morning. Izuku turned pink and shrugged. I don't know. I feel like something bad is gonna happen. It's just a bad feeling, you know. Katsuki just nodded as he started making himself a cup of coffee. He was adding sugar to his cup as he reached his hand out to the bottle that needed to be warmed for Ikika. Katsuki's hand started to heat the bottle as he mixed the sugar with his coffee. He looked back at Izuku after he didn't take the bottle back. He saw that Izuku was muttering about his bad feeling again, so he placed a hand on the boy's back. Boy, nerd, Izuku looked up. Everything should be fine. If anything happens with you guys, text me. I'll do the same. I promise. But before we do anything you need to feed Ikika. She's starting to get fussy. Izuku looks up, noticing that Katsuki was right. He grabbed the bottle and picked Ikika up, feeding her the bottle as he walked back into the kitchen. That doesn't mean that it will be fine. What if I get hurt? What if you get hurt? What if Ikika gets hurt? What would she do if we both got hurt? What if something happens with your paw? Izuku was cut off when Katsuki gently grabbed his face with his hands. Shut up, dummy. You'll be fine. I won't let anything happen to you or Ikika. I'll be fine if I get hurt. After all, I can't be a hero if I can't handle getting a little banged up. Like I said, you will text me if anything happens and vice versa. Sounds good. Izuku was caught in the silence. He stared into Katsuki's eyes, just now noticing that the crimson red helped him feel safe. Though the feeling wasn't completely gone, it was significantly weaker. Okay, Kaken, he whispered. Katsuki nodded and released Izuku. He gave them a look and went upstairs, presumably to get ready for school. Izuku sighed, allowing his shoulders to relax and fall back into place. He looked at the girl in his arms. What are we gonna do with Kaken? Huh. The girl simply giggled in return before going back to her bottle. Izuku had finished his school work for the day, now watching his daughter as she was playing on the floor. His bad feeling had been getting worse all day, and right now it's at the worst it's been all day. Izuku frowned, not knowing what to do. He was about to call Katsuki, as a way to keep himself feeling safe. Just as he reached for his phone, it went off, the ringtone being Katsuki's. Izuku had a small freak out before he answered, wondering if the boy was hurt or in trouble. He answered the phone with a meek, yet frantic, hello. Nerd. Katsuki's voice came through, but so did the voice of many of his classmates. Yeah, Kaken. Izuku was pacing the living room floor. You know that bad feeling you had this morning? Katsuki waits for an affirmative hum before continuing. I get what you mean now. I have a bad feeling about this. If I randomly hang up or stop responding, call someone. Izuku gulps. What? Catch Han, what's going on? Are you sure the day is gonna go good? Katsuki breathes. I don't know, Izuku. Izuku's breathing stills, even as he hears Katsuki yelling at his classmates to shut up. Things should be fine, but I'm going to send you my location just in case, okay? Izuku nods, silently freaking out. Okay, Kaken. Izuku waits for the notification to come through, sighing in relief when he can zoom in and see his specific location. The boys sit on the phone in silence, the only sounds being Katsuki's classmates and Ikika's babbling. Izuku was beginning to calm down again, hearing a student freak out about being around Pro Hero 13. Izuku understands. He would be freaking out if he met them in person too, honestly. He was about to ask Katsuki a question when he heard someone ask if something was supposed to be happening. Izuku tenses and checks Katsuki's location, taking a screenshot of it as he heard Eraserhead say something before the line went silent. He called Katsuki's nickname multiple times. After getting no answer, he called Tsukachi, despite not wanting to bother the man. "Hello, Midoriya-kun. Is something wrong?" The detective is immediately on edge, as the teen had never called his personal number before, despite having it for quite a while. Izuku took a deep breath before he started talking. This might sound kind of stupid, but I think something is wrong at Yui. He hears shuffling and something metal clinking. "What do you think is wrong, Midoriya-kun? And why?" Izuku took another breath, putting Ikika in her stroller. I've had a bad feeling all day. Kaken had called me to say he agreed. He sent me his location, a place on Yui's campus, and told me to call someone if he randomly hung up. I was able to take a screenshot of the location before the call ended. The phone went silent just now. Tsukachi took a deep breath. "I'll trust you on this, Midoriya-kun. You're a smart kid. Can you meet me at Yui, or do you need a ride? I want to see the picture of his location, as would Nenzu, I presume. I can meet you there. It'd take longer to get Ikika's car seat in your car than it would to meet you there." Tsukachi nodded, telling Izuku to meet him in front of the gates as he rushed to his car, motioning for Sansa and a few others to get in their cars and follow him. Tsukachi saw Izuku walk up to the front as he got out of his car. He nodded to the boy before walking up to him. "Midoriya-kun, I need you to be next to me as we walk through the gates. If you aren't, it could set the alarms off." Izuku nodded before falling into step next to the detective. Izuku was surprised to see Nenzu a few feet from the entrance, watching as they walked closer. "Tsukachi-san, to what do I owe you the pleasure?" Nenzu says, virtually ignoring Izuku and the baby. Tsukachi started speaking, nodding to Izuku. "This is Midoriya-kun. He's close to one of the students in Class 1 and has reason to believe they are in trouble. I'm in agreement, as Eraserhead has not answered my calls, when he usually does after I call him multiple times consecutively." Nenzu's smile falters slightly. "I see. I'll check the camera feed. Follow me." Izuku nods, jittery that they are taking so long, but he understands why. He feels awkward walking through the school halls with a stroller. The glances that students in the halls had given him didn't help either, as there was no way he could pass as a student that got stuck babysitting. They walked down one of the halls for a minute before turning into a room. Just as the principal frowned and started muttering over the cameras not connecting, a student burst through the room. The boy stopped in the doorway and started talking. "Nenzu-san, they're students at the USJ. I was able to slip through the door, but they have a teleportation villain who has trapped everyone else inside. They're talking about having a creature capable of killing All Might." Izuku's small gasp got the boy's attention, him looking extremely confused at the random kid with a baby in his principal's office. Nenzu called the attention off of Izuku, thankfully. "Ada-kun, do you think your engines are strong enough to speed up one of the buses? If we have someone driving, would you be able to give a speed boost?" The boy, Ida, nodded. Nenzu nodded and gestured for everyone in the room to follow him. Izuku feeling awkward around all of the adults and the one hero student. Nenzu led everyone to the bus as he paged the school through his watch. "This is Principal Nenzu. Hero teams through meet in the parking lot. All those that stay behind will combine and take care of the students." Izuku slowly shifts closer to Tsukachi. "Is it okay for us to be here, Tsukachi-san? I don't want to be in anyone's way with the stroller." Nenzu, apparently hearing Izuku's question, responded instead, "It's your choice, Midoriya-san, I presume. The stroller won't be a problem on the bus, though that may change if any students need to go to the hospital." Izuku nods, steeling himself. "I'd like to come, Nenzu-san. If needed, I can help with first aid. My mother was a nurse and taught me as much as she could." Nenzu nods silently to the boy, ushering him onto the bus before any of the adults, allowing Tsukachi to help him buckle the stroller to the platform. Izuku had gotten a few looks from some of the heroes as they climbed on the bus, though they ignored him in favor of asking Nenzu questions. Izuku stood behind Tsukachi, holding onto one of the handles of Ikika's stroller. He stopped listening to Tsukachi, who was calling in for some ambulances to be sent to the place they were going to, when he heard a squeal. He looked up to see Midnight climb in the bus as Nenzu closed the door and told present Mike to floor it. He watched as Midnight walked closer to him, Tsukachi's arm going out to keep her a safe distance back. Izuku sent a grateful look to the man. The detective pushed Midnight slightly back, establishing that she had gotten too close to the teen. She ignored the push and shoved Tsukachi's arm down, though she didn't attempt to get closer to the teen and baby. "Oh my goodness, she is so cute," Midnight exclaimed, waving to the baby. Izuku flushed pink, not knowing what to say. Tsukachi glared at the hero and said her name firmly, telling her to cool it. Tsukachi turned to face Izuku, ignoring the insults that Midnight was sending his way. "Midoriya-kun." Tsukachi waited for Izuku to look at him. "If you're serious about helping with first aid, I can keep her near me, or have one of my officers look after her." At least until you or Bakugou-kun are free to take her. Though if Bakugou-kun has to be taken to the hospital, I doubt you would be able to bring her in the ambulance. Izuku thinks for a second before looking at his daughter. I'd appreciate it if you or Sansa-san would look after her, though I'd prefer no other officer did. If Kaken needs to be taken to the hospital, I trust you to bring her to meet us at the hospital. Though if he doesn't, I can take her back once I've helped with everything that I can. Sukachi nods to the boy. He feels bad that he's dragging him and his daughter into a villain fight, but he's proud of the boy's maturity. He tells Izuku that he's going to entrust the girl in Sansa's care for the time being, but he would be the one to bring her to the hospital if needed. Izuku seems pleased, the expression changing as the bus comes to a stop. Izuku grabs a bag from the bottom of the stroller before bowing to the detective and Sansa before he walks off of the bus behind the heroes. Izuku wasn't expecting Present Mike to use his quirk, but he was grateful that it looked like the man looked around for the baby first. Izuku watched as some students walked out. He rushed to them to see if they needed any medical attention. The students shook their heads, though one of them pointed into the USJ. We're fine. 13 needs help though. Your Araka-san is bringing them out, but it's really bad. Izuku nods and waits until he sees 13 being floated outside by a student. He curses under his breath, grabbing a bunch of supplies from the bag at his hip. He points to a part of the floor that had no bumps on it. Put them over here, Genti. Could you sit in front of them? I'll stay back here, Izuku said, starting to unwrap a roll of gauze. The student nodded, placing the hero on the floor in front of the boy. She followed the boy's instructions, helping him wrap gauze around the hero's chest and torso. Once the hero was done, the boy stood up, telling her what to explain to the paramedics when they got there. She watched as the boy rushed over to Jiru and Yamomo, handing them burn cream and trusting them to help each other put it on. She didn't realize she was watching the boy until Ida showed up behind her, asking what happened. Izuku didn't know how to feel. Most of the students' injuries were minor or just required a cream, which they could help each other with. Izuku started counting students and frowned, noticing that 5 students were missing, including Katsuki. Izuku was about to ask if any of the students outside knew where the rest were, when he heard a voice call from the entrance of the building. He looked over, just to freeze. There was a girl with a mutation quirk, most likely a frog based on her wide mouth and large eyes, and a short boy, dragging what seemed like their teacher on their shoulders. He asked them what happened as he rushed to wrap the worst wound that he could see, which ended up being the man's elbow. He put many layers of gauze over the hero's elbow when he noticed that the hero was waking up. He apologized as he put a makeshift splint on the arm that was bent the wrong way. The hero tried to say something and sit up, but Izuku made him lay back down. He placed the man's head in his lap, kneeling over his face to try and see the cut he was bleeding from. He was being optimistic, hoping that there were only 1 or 2 small cuts on the man's face. He only hoped that because he knew head injuries bleed profusely, despite the cut size. He couldn't figure out where the cut was because of the amount of blood. He looked around, asking if anyone had water. Nobody seemed to, but one of the heroes mentioned that they had a small saltwater pond not too far. Izuku nodded, hearing someone speed away, probably the boy that sped into the principal's office earlier. As he waited for the water, he looked around for fabric. He didn't see any, so he grimaced as he ripped a strip of fabric from the sleeve of his shirt. The boy from earlier was standing next to him, helmet full of water. Izuku smiled gratefully at the boy before he turned back to the hero's head in his lap. Eraserhead, if you're awake, which I hope to calming you are, this is going to sting. I'm sorry. Izuku dips the strip of fabric into the water and wrings the strip out before using it to wipe at the hero's face. Izuku let out a sigh of relief as the hero grimaced. At least he wasn't unconscious. He notices that the hero has a cut under his eye. Thankfully, it doesn't look to be deep. He looked at the boy next to him as he heard footsteps come from inside the building. Hold this against that cut. It's not bad. It's only bleeding that bad because of where it is. The boy nodded as Izuku got up. He watched as the boy took his place, smart enough to try and keep the teacher talking. Izuku looked up as the ambulances showed up. There were only 2, but it should be fine due to the amount of paramedics in each one. He looked down to see 3 boys walking up the stairs. One boy had half red, half white hair. The other had red spiky hair, and the last boy was Katsuki. Izuku breathed out in relief. He didn't realize he had started crying until he heard his name. Izuku, what the fuck are you doing here? How did you even get here? Where the fuck is Ikika? Why are you crying? Stop crying, you dumbass. I'm fine, Katsuki said, not noticing that his use of an actual name had gotten the attention of his classmates. Izuku didn't say anything. He just rushed forward and launched himself into Katsuki's arms, squeezing tightly. Katsuki seemed annoyed at the hug, but he hugged Izuku back just as tightly. They hugged in silence until Izuku moved back, wiping at his nose with his sleeve, noticing that Katsuki noticed it was ripped. Katsuki just raised a brow at the younger boy, expecting his questions to be answered. I heard your teacher say something about villains and then the call ended. I called Sukachi Hi-san and told him I thought you were in trouble. We met up here and talked to Nedzu-san about it. He told me I could come here with the heroes. Ikika is with Sansa-san and Tsukachi-san. I am crying because you're okay. I was so scared that you wouldn't be. Katsuki made a tisk noise and ruffled Izuku's hair. I'm fine. I told you that we would end up fine at the end of the day. Now that that's over, I'm ready to change and go home and sleep. Let's find Ikika and get onto a bus so I can get out of this stupid fucking costume. Izuku nodded and led Katsuki behind one of the buses, leading them out of the eyesight of Katsuki's classmates. All of the students were already in shock. That interaction was just the icing on the cake. Katsuki sighed when he got home, immediately grabbing Ikika out of her stroller. He carried her around, making noises at her, imitating a conversation. Izuku smiled fondly at the boy. He realized, not for the first time today, that he didn't know what he would do if anything happened to the boy. He watched as Katsuki finished the coffee that was in the coffee pot. Izuku saw as he split the coffee into 2 different cups with precision, despite cradling a 4-month-old to his chest. Izuku noticed that he put creamer, sugar, and a bit of milk in one cup, while just throwing sugar in the other cup. Katsuki walked past Izuku, pushing the much lighter-colored coffee in his hands as he went to sit on the couch. Izuku followed Katsuki as he sat down, placing the baby in his lap. Izuku couldn't help but smile as he watched Katsuki play peekaboo with Ikika. Once Ikika started to seem tired, Katsuki stopped playing with her. He faced Izuku instead, asking what he wanted to watch. Izuku replied with a random show, not caring. Izuku hadn't realized that he had fallen asleep until he woke up to Katsuki moving his head off the latter's shoulder. Izuku sleepily watched as Katsuki deposited Ikika in her crib and brought the empty coffee mugs to the kitchen. Izuku watched Katsuki walk back into the room, seeing the boy's surprise when he realized he was awake. Katsuki sent a small smirk to the boy. Morning, sleeping beauty. Izuku looked at Katsuki and lazily punched the blonde's shoulder as he sat back down. Katsuki grabbed the boy's hand and turned to look at the face connected to the hand he was holding. He looks into Izuku's eyes. Izuku, why were you actually crying earlier? Izuku looked shocked at the blonde. He didn't realize the blonde had picked up on the lie. You see, it wasn't a complete lie. I was actually really happy that you weren't hurt. But, before I knew you were safe and stuff, I realized that I wouldn't know what to do with Ikika if something happened to you. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. Why would that matter? You have the hag and old man, Plu. Izuku cut the boy off, breaking eye contact. It isn't like that. Katsuki looked at the boy again, looking more confused than anything at that point. What do you mean, Izuku? Izuku squeezed his eyes shut and muttered something. Katsuki told him to speak louder, but he said it while moving Izuku's face back up, making the former's face turn more pink than before. Because I like you, Kakin. Like, in a romantic way. And you've been really helpful with her. I couldn't think about raising her without you, especially because I can't think about how I would deal with it if something happened to you. I didn't realize it until earlier, when I didn't know if you would make it out of the building alive, especially after seeing and helping the injuries for your teachers. Izuku looked sideways, wringing his fingers together after Katsuki had stayed silent for so long. He felt one of Katsuki's hands grab both of his while the other made him look at Katsuki's face again. Katsuki just looked into Izuku's eyes for a moment before he spoke. I feel the same, Izuku. My only thought today was that I had to get out of the building and come home to you too. He glanced at the sleeping baby. The answer only succeeded in making Izuku's blush worse, especially at the intense eye contact Katsuki was holding. He was about to break the silence when Katsuki did instead. Midoriya Izuku, would you do me the honor of allowing me to be your boyfriend, as well as Ikika's temporary father? As if Izuku's blush couldn't get any worse, Katsuki gently kissed one of his hands after the question. Izuku was over the moon. He and Katsuki had been dating for about 2 months now, and the only way his behavior changed was for the better. He started using his classmates' real names instead of the stupid nicknames he gave them at the beginning of the year, and that was only the start. He started calling Izuku more pet names instead of nerd or idiot. He had gotten more domestic, hanging off of Izuku's back, having an arm around Izuku's waist when they were outside. Though he didn't know that Izuku could hear him, he would talk to Ikika and often refer to himself as Dada instead of as Kakin. Izuku loved it. He was never without a smile when Katsuki was around. Katsuki always noticed when he was getting tired or annoyed and would take over caring for the baby for a few hours, leaving Izuku to wind down. To be honest, Izuku was expecting lots of miscommunication, mostly because Katsuki had spilled that he bullied Izuku as a way to keep him from getting hurt, and being a hero would lead to him getting hurt. Despite this huge miscommunication between the two that had lasted years, Katsuki was very passionate about making sure Izuku knew what he wanted and when, and vice versa. Katsuki had also started taking Izuku on dates. After Katsuki had found a babysitter he deemed good enough, he had made sure that she would be free to watch the baby every other Saturday so that the teens could have a date night. On days when Izuku had texted Katsuki while he was at school, He would bring home flowers or chocolate or even some ice cream. All of these actions made it easier and harder to let Katsuki leave though. The older boy had been very clear that he would be going to Hasu for his work study, telling Izuku as soon as Manuel had agreed to take him in, despite the completely different quirks. Izuku had been nervous. Katsuki would be gone for days after all. This is the first time that Izuku would be home alone with Ikika 24/7 since she was born. Katsuki promised to text him when he got to Hasu and whenever anything happened. Izuku also promised to let him know if anything were to happen to Ikika. They had hugged and Katsuki had kissed both the teen and the baby goodbye before leaving to meet his classmates at the train center. Izuku sighed as he looked at Ikika. "What am I going to do with you now that your dad is gone?" Huh. The girl just smiled, turning her head in Izuku's direction. Izuku shook his head and picked the girl up. They had recently learned that Ikika liked music a lot. Him and Katsuki had been dancing in the living room one day, trying to calm Ikika down as she had just started teething. Nothing had helped her calm down, not even frozen towels, until Izuku started humming a song. She seemed entranced by his humming, seemingly more willing to chew on her teething toy than before. They had taken to playing music off of a speaker constantly now, as it seemed to just generally calm her down now. He looked down at her and started swaying her. Hopefully she would lie down for her nap now. Katsuki was nervous. This was the first time he'd left Izuku for more than a few hours since he moved in. The fact that Izuku didn't have anyone to help him with Ikika didn't make him feel any better. He had made sure to text Izuku when he got off of the train at Hasu. He made his way to Manuel's agency. There were a few reasons why Katsuki chose a water-based pro, but the main reason was that Ida's brother had gotten hurt here. He had a feeling that Mr. Goody Two-Shoes wouldn't be Mr. Goody Two-Shoes much longer if he was left alone here. He had been training with one of Manuel's sidekicks, completely quirkless, when the sidekick asked why he chose the agency, as his quirk had to do more with fire than water. Katsuki had to think of an answer on the fly. "Yeah, but my quirk only works when I'm sweating. I sweat nitroglycerin and sparks that I can make from my hands make them look like explosions. If I'm not sweating, I can't use my quirk. I was hoping I would be able to build up some sort of tolerance, or see if my explosions can still work even if it's a mix of sweat and something else." The sidekick nodded before trying to sneak attack him, but he had seen the small twitch in the man's ankle before he picked his foot off of the ground. Katsuki grinned at the man before attacking back. "Oh my, Kami." Izuku really underestimated his frickin' baby. She, in fact, did not lie down after Katsuki left, but instead chose to cry without consolation. She had just calmed down and the other boy had only been gone for 2 hours. 2 hours. He had to make sure he called Katsuki before bed instead of texting him. He read that her reaction could be because she couldn't hear or see Katsuki anymore, so he hoped her hearing his voice would help her calm down. Thankfully, there hadn't been any incidents with Ikika in the following days. Izuku thinks it was due to hearing Katsuki's voice every morning and every night. He was actually faring pretty well, especially having to suddenly take care of a 6-month-old completely on his own after having help for so long. Izuku was getting ready to call Katsuki to say goodnight when his phone went off. He checked it and paled. "Why is Tsukachi-sen calling me? Especially this late?" He answered hesitantly. "Hello. Is there something wrong, Tsukachi-san?" He heard a sigh. "I just got word from the chief of police in Hasu. They need someone to come in for Bakugou-kun and you're his only emergency contact beside his parents. I told him that I would call you, as we can go down to Hasu together." Izuku let out a shaky breath, slowly standing up. "What happened with Kaken, Tsukachi-san? Why does the chief of police need someone there?" He heard something make noise. "I can explain to you in the car. I don't know how long we'll be in Hasu for, so please pack a bag for a few days, for both you and Ikika. The police station will cover your expenses for a hotel if you end up staying." Izuku just agreed, hanging up. He brought his phone upstairs, not wanting to wake the baby up when she had just settled down. He had managed to pack bags for each of them, having enough supplies to last them 3 days. He was working on detaching the seat from the stroller so he could put it in Tsukachi's car when there was a light knock at the door. He opened the door to see Tsukachi. "I'm done packing. All I need to do is get the seat out of the stroller set up and then we can leave. If you can take the stroller, Tsukachi-san, I can go grab Ikika from the living room." Tsukachi nodded, grabbing the stroller set up and folding it before putting it in his trunk. He opens one of the back doors, holding it open for Izuku to buckle the car seat in. Izuku nods and climbs in the back seat, buckling Ikika's car seat in before buckling himself. Tsukachi got in the driver's seat. "Okay, so, from the limited information I was given, I understand that one of Bakugou-kun's classmates had gotten caught by Stain, the hero killer. He had managed to send his emergency location to a class group chat and Bakugou-san had been one of the 2 classmates nearby. He had rushed over, along with another classmate, and they had taken down the man together. From what I know, the boys won't be in legal trouble if they choose to go with a cover story of a pro finding them and taking down the villain while saving them. All 3 boys had been admitted into the hospital, though only one of them had serious injuries. They just need someone to come and sign him out of the hospital before he is allowed to leave. Izuku looked at Tsukachi like he had grown a second head. I'm not an adult. Adults are the only ones allowed to sign minors out of a hospital. Tsukachi sighed. You see, not many people know this, but in Japan, if a minor is at least 13, they are legally considered an adult if there is anyone under 13 in their care. The only reason we are going down there now is because I have to meet up with an old friend, so I figured I could give you a ride instead of making you take the train. Izuku nodded, not knowing how to feel now that he was informed he's seen as an adult in the eyes of the law. They continued the car ride in silence. It had taken another hour or so before they pulled up in front of Hasu General Hospital. Tsukachi takes out the stroller setup, unfolding it as Izuku unbuckles the car seat. He murmured a thanks to Tsukachi as he walked to the door. He didn't hear footsteps, so he looked behind him, confused. Tsukachi noticed the confused look on the boy's face. I have to go or I'll be late. I'm sorry, Midoriya-kun. Just go in and say you need to go to the hero floor and see Bakugou-kun. Let me know if anything happens. If Bakugou-san is free to leave by tonight, just tell me and I can drive us all home. Izuku nodded, suddenly feeling uncomfortable with all of the eyes on him and his baby. He slowly made his way into the hospital, immediately heading to the reception desk. Hi, excuse me, Izuku said, not continuing until a nurse looked at him. I'm here for Bakugou Katsuki II. He should be on THE hero floor. The nurse nodded, motioning for him to follow her to the elevators. She had walked in the elevator with him, inserting a key into a secret compartment before the elevator moved. Once the elevator stopped moving, she waved goodbye to him and Ikika before sending it back downstairs. Izuku looked around the floor, finding it surprisingly empty. He saw another receptionist's desk and walked to it. One of the nurses noticed him before he had to say anything. Hi, how can I help you? The nurse said, quieting down as she noticed the sleeping baby in the stroller. She gave him an apologetic look when the baby stirred. Izuku tapped the handles of the stroller. I'm here to see Bakugou Katsuki, and to sign him out WHHHN aloud. The nurse nodded, making her way around the desk. She cooed to him about how adorable Ikika was before stopping outside of a large room. She knocked on the door and only opened it after hearing 3 gruff voices call out. She peeked her head in. Bakugou-kun. The blonde boy moved his gaze to her from where he was staring at the ceiling. Yeah. She smiled softly at him. You have a visitor, she whispered behind her before turning back to him. Someone named Midoriya Izuku. Katsuki moved from laying down to sitting up as he heard the name. Concerning the 2 boys he shared the room with, you can let him in. She nodded before opening the door wider, letting Izuku push the stroller in before closing the door behind him. Izuku awkwardly waved at the 2 other boys before fretting over Katsuki. Kakin, get back in bed. They haven't cleared you yet. The 2 boys were expecting Katsuki to yell or shove the boy, as that was his reaction to them when they told him the same thing earlier, and were surprised when the boy just sat back down on his bed. He was looking at the stroller, his eyes not completely focusing. Izuku noticed, though, grabbing Katsuki's hand. When the blonde looked back at Izuku, he smiled. She's fine. She's just sleeping. Has been since like 6. She's okay. I'm okay. You're okay. Katsuki just nodded. Then he looked at the privacy curtain around his bed. Izuku got the hint and moved the stroller closer to the bed before closing the curtain. As soon as the curtain was closed, he felt arms around his waist. He turned around and pushed Katsuki so he was sitting down. Katsuki's arms just tightened around him, pulling Izuku between his legs at the edge of the bed. Izuku just stood there, running one of his hands through the blonde hair while the other one stroked the bandaged forearm. They didn't know how long they stood like that for when there was a noise coming from the foot of the bed. Izuku got out of Katsuki's arms and brought Ikika over to him, reveling in the way his eyes brightened upon seeing her. Hi, princess, he said, gentle as ever. How's Papa been? Has he been taking good care of you? Izuku shook his head as he watched the 2 interact. He was calm until he heard a knock at the room door. Izuku looked back at Katsuki and removed the privacy screen as the blonde nodded to it. Izuku moved it and opened the room door. As the 2 other boys, Izuku just now noticing one of them helped him with Aizawa at the USJ, were on their beds. He saw a very tall man with a dog mutation quirk, presumably Hasu's chief of police. He looked down at the boy in surprise before looking around the room. I assume you're the Midoriya-kun Tsukachi mentioned earlier, rough. Izuku nodded and bowed. Yes, I am. It's nice to meet you, sir. The chief slightly shook his head, letting Izuku know he didn't need to bow. I'm here to talk to the boys about what's going to happen, rough. Am I correct in the assumption that you already know the truth? Rough. Surigami waited for the boy to nod before continuing. All right then. Please sit as we talk, rough. I hope you don't mind that the heroes the boys are currently studying under join the conversation. Izuku nodded. That sounds good, sir. Surigami nodded, moving to allow the heroes into the room. If any of them are surprised by the baby sitting on Katsuki's lap, they don't show it. Izuku sits down beside Katsuki on his cot as the chief starts talking. I'm Kenji Tsurugami, the chief of police for Hasu City, rough. Due to none of you boys having provisional licenses yet, we are supposed to reprimand you. Though, we are grateful for you three, as you got rid of a villain who had slipped through our fingers many times. I will leave the reprimanding up to your work-study heroes and homeroom teacher. All three boys groaned as soon as their teacher was mentioned, and Izuku looked at Katsuki. Is Eraserhead really that bad? Katsuki just nods. He's terrible, Izuku. I'm gonna get home from school and just straight pass out for at least 2 weeks because of this. Izuku shook his head. I doubt that, but okay. Tsurugami waits for them to finish their conversation before continuing. Although we aren't going to reprimand you for illegal quirk usage, we cannot let the press know. If the press finds out that you three took him down, it will come back at all of us. The story the press will be told and that you will be expected to go along with is that you three were helping civilians when the Namu attack had happened. You walked past an alley and got jumped by him, though the heroes knew your general area. The arresting hero will be Endeavor, as the burns given to him by Shoto will make the story add up seamlessly. The boys nodded, all in agreement. Once Tsurugami had left the room, Izuku watched the boys get yelled at by their respective heroes. He noticed Manuel's hesitancy to lecture Katsuki while he had Ikika in his lap, so he took her into his arms. Katsuki looked at him in betrayal as he nodded Manuel in Katsuki's direction, silently telling him that Katsuki deserved the lecture. Kami, why did Aizawa-sensei have so many things for them to do? All Katsuki wanted was to spend his summer break with his boyfriend and daughter. Yes, she was his daughter now too. He had been helping raise her for the past 12 months, but he had been an even bigger part of her life after he and Izuku started dating. Before they were dating, he stayed back because he didn't know if Izuku was okay with him being super close to the girl. But after they officially started dating, he took care of her as much as he could. He couldn't believe that he was stuck in this stupid fucking basement, with these stupid fucking villains, missing the literal fucking lights of his life. He didn't blame Aizawa-sensei. Not actually, he's just annoyed at not being able to be there for Izuku. He had promised Izuku that he would be fine and make it home the second that they were back in town. Now he doesn't even know what town he was in. He broke out of his thoughts and scowled as one of the stupid fucking villains tried to approach him again. He really wanted to be back home with Izuku right now. Izuku really wanted Katsuki to be back home right now. It had been an annoying enough week without the blonde. Now his annoyance was as high as ever. The second he had gotten the call from Nedzu, he had almost broken down. He knows Ikika is too young to remember him breaking down if she saw it, but he tends to ignore everything until it's all over. He had to calm himself down before listening to Nedzu out. Midoriya-kun, I know how you feel regarding this situation. Eraserhead had told me about your analysis of him, even if he didn't know it was you at the time. I know a group of students who are planning to try and save Bakugou-kun, though I doubt they will be successful as they don't know him. I'd like for you to come out to Yui and help them plan. I can take care of the baby, if you choose to trust me. Izuku huffed. I'll be at the school in 10 minutes. Make sure your students are in your office as well. I hope you know that I'm not only entrusting you with my daughter's life, but also mine and my boyfriend's. Nedzu chirped a response and hung up, calling to get the students to his office as soon as possible. When Izuku walked into Nedzu's office, he saw 4 students in the room, 3 boys and 1 girl. He recognized 2 of the boys as the ones that were in the stain incident with Katsuki a few months ago. He pushed the stroller towards Nedzu. She's sleeping. Anything you could need for her is in the bag on the bottom. Nedzu nodded and returned to silence as Izuku turned back to the students sitting on the couches. Izuku smiled and bowed at the students before introducing himself. Hello. We've only met in passing, I believe, and for that I apologize. I'm Midoriya Izuku, a close friend of Kaken. Nedzu raised an eyebrow at the word choice, distinctively remembering Izuku calling Katsuki his boyfriend on the phone not too long ago. Nedzu shook the feeling off as the students finished introducing themselves. Izuku sat down across from them and his personality did a complete 180. What information do we currently have? The only girl, Yaoyorozu, replied. We have a likely location that he's being held at. We also know that they had chosen to take Bakugou-sen due to his brash personality. Izuku nodded. How do we find the location? He stared at Yaoyorozu as something came from her arm. It was so cool to watch, but that had to wait. She handed it over to him. It's a tracker. After hearing that they wanted Bakugou-sen, I slipped a tracking device onto his pants. Izuku nodded, giving her a sincere thank you before turning back to the whole group and smiling. Here's what we're going to do. It was now about an hour later, and the small group was huddled behind a yawl and going over their plan again. Nedzu knew the teens were there, but no one else knew, and they were going to use that to their advantage. Nedzu had told them what All Might's plan was so they could correlate. As soon as the building was bust into, Best Jeanist had placed quirk-canceling cuffs on everyone he could while Edgeshot took out the teleporting guy. They were all tense, waiting for more movement that Nezu predicted. Once the heroes were starting to calm down, a huge man came breaking through the basement, knocking everyone in the bar to different areas. Once Katsuki was knocked away by the giant man thing, he used his quirk to get as far away from the bar as possible. He thought he was safe when he felt something grab his leg. He looked back to see the villain holding onto his ankle. His quirk wasn't active due to the cuffs, but he was stronger than he looked and was able to hold Katsuki in place. Katsuki kept trying to tug his leg free, but the man had managed to wrap his quirk-canceling cuffs around the blonde's ankle, giving him the risk of tearing the cuffs off if he tried to use his quirk to run away. Katsuki cuffed, giving in and sitting on the floor near the villain. He tried to keep the man as far away as he could from them being tangled together. The hand guy was watching the man that broke out of the building fight all night, seemingly entranced. Katsuki was about to turn and watch the fight as well, when he heard a small clang next to him. He looked to see a small key. He looked to see where it came from and was grateful to see his classmates and boyfriend, even if he wouldn't admit it to anyone but Izuku. He grabbed the key and went to bend down but stopped when Izuku shook his head. He watched Izuku, waiting until he nodded. He finally saw Izuku nod and he quickly reached down, unlocking one of the cuffs, pulling his ankle away, and cuffing the wrist. Tatsuki gets up and starts running only to see his classmates and Izuku in the air, seemingly given a boost by a combination of icy hot and Car's quirks. He grabbed Izuku's hand, allowing himself to be pulled to his boyfriend. Todoroki made another ice hill for them to slide down. They had ended up running onto a nearby train, trying to get as far away from the fight as possible. Once they were in a town closer to Musutafu, they relaxed. Izuku ran and hugged Katsuki as tight as he could, burying his face in the taller man's chest. Katsuki squeezed Izuku just as tight, burying his face in the green unruly hair, and he could feel his unshed tears coming out. Once Katsuki figured he let enough tears out, he suddenly pulled back. Eyes wide, "Where's Ikika?" Izuku placed his hands on Katsuki's jaw and rubbed his thumb over his cheekbone. "She's okay, Kaken. She's with Nezu-san." Katsuki calmed down and leaned into Izuku's touch, closing his eyes and trying to hide his slight smile. Izuku smiled back and leaned his head back onto Katsuki's chest, hands following. The boys just stood together for a bit, basking in being together again after being apart for so long. Katsuki's classmates felt rude and exchanged glances. That did not seem like just close friends to them. They started to lead their way to Yue, hearing the other two follow and step behind them. Once they got back to the school, Nezu had dismissed his students, minus Katsuki. He made sure the kids knew that there were going to be parent-teacher meetings tomorrow about the dorms, so they should get a good night's rest. Izuku and Katsuki look at Nezu confused, but they still follow him to his office. Once they got in the office, Katsuki made a beeline for Ikika, picking her up and holding her against his chest, even if she was sleeping. Nezu gestures for the boys to take a seat on the couch across from him, offering them tea that had seemingly just appeared. Once both boys were seated, Nezu started talking. "As you heard, we will be building dorms and they will be mandatory. So far, I'm the only one who knows that the two of you are raising Ikika alone for the moment, as Tsukachi had included me on the case. There will be teachers stopping by tomorrow to discuss it further with you, but I've given everyone else a heads up, so it's only fair that you get one too." The boys nodded at Nezu, thanking him for the heads up. They got their things ready to leave with Ikika still in Katsuki's arms as they left the building. Katsuki had carried Ikika all the way home, afraid that if he put her down he wouldn't get her back. Once they got home, they immediately went to lay down. They had recently taken over the living room as a bedroom. Moving all of that furniture in the rooms upstairs was a lot of work for the two of them. Izuku goes and lays down on the couch, Katsuki lying the opposite way while placing his head on Izuku's lap and Ikika on his chest. He had been babbling back at her the entire walk home, finding comfort in the girl's voice. He had been repeating what she said when he suddenly stopped. Izuku looked down, confused as to why they stopped. He saw Katsuki with a shocked look on his face. "What happened, Kaken?" She just... Katsuki didn't get a chance to finish his sentence when Izuku heard it. "Dada, Papa," he heard in between giggles from the young girl. The teens knew they were supposed to get a good night's rest and look presentable for the teachers tomorrow, but they were so excited. They had stayed up most of the night with Ikika, mostly because she also tried taking her first steps, and neither of them wanted to risk missing it. They all went to sleep when they were exhausted, but exhausted from the pure happiness instead of the terror that had occurred over the past week. Izuku had woken up before Katsuki and Ikika, being a naturally early riser. He was making his way to the kitchen when he remembered that Katsuki's teachers were going to be coming around that day. He had freaked out silently, allowing Katsuki to sleep for a bit longer. He didn't know what time the teachers would show up, but he couldn't be naive enough to think it would take them hours to get to their home. He started the coffee pot, changed into more presentable clothes, and cleaned up some of Ikika's toys that had been thrown around the living room. Once all of Ikika's toys were picked up, he gently took the girl out of her crib. He woke Katsuki up and told him to go change himself and Ikika, as Katsuki's teachers should be there within the next 15 minutes to half hour if Nedzu's text has anything to go by. Once Katsuki comes back downstairs, he takes in both his and the baby's appearance. He shakes his head at Katsuki. He had gotten her a specific sweater to go with those pants, but whatever. Izuku grins and gives Katsuki a good morning kiss. He goes to make them each a cup of coffee when there's a knock on the door. Katsuki opens the door, nodding and greeting at his teachers. He grabs a few pairs of guest slippers from the nearby closet and hands them to the heroes, all in silence. Izuku walks out of the kitchen. Kaken, say something. They don't know their way around the house, so they bring them to the living room. Katsuki pretends to mock Izuku before looking back at his teachers. You guys want something to drink? We've got coffee, tea, water, and lemonade. The heroes, except for Nedzu who tagged along for this house only, didn't respond. Nedzu popped out of Aizawa's scarf. I'd love a cup of tea, Midoriya-kun. I'm sure Aizawa-san would love some coffee and Toshinori-san some water. Izuku nods and returns to the kitchen to get drinks, not before elbowing Katsuki. Katsuki rolls his eyes yet talks anyway. Follow me. We can sit in the living room. Aizawa had recovered from the shock of seeing a baby fairly quickly. How have things been, Bakugou? I haven't had a chance to talk to you since before the incident. Katsuki shrugs, sitting on the floor across from the adults, who had taken the couch. Things have been good. I've got Izuku and Ikika. They make things better. Aizawa gives a slight smile. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Katsuki just nods, thanking Kami that Izuku had chosen that time to walk into the room with a tray of their drinks. Izuku handed the drinks out to each person before looking at Nedzu. Nedzu took a sip of his tea before clapping. This is some exquisite tea, Midoriya-san. Thank you, but we must talk about why we are here. Aizawa took that as his placing his coffee cup down. As I'm sure Nedzu told you, Yui is now starting up dorms for the students and teachers. It's the best safety precaution we could take to prevent more occurrences such as yours, Bakugou. With everyone else we had to come over to get parental consent, but Nedzu had called your parents last night. Katsuki nodded, reaching the hand not holding Ikika up to take a sip of his coffee. Before the adults can continue, Katsuki places his hand on Izuku's thigh, just to remind him of the other boy's presence. Toshinori continued this time. As Aizawa mentioned, we called your parents last night. They agreed to let you live in the dorms, but only if Midoriya-kun was able to come as well. Given they are also Midoriya-kun's guardians, we do not need to ask them for permission again. But instead we must ask you, Midoriya-san. Nedzu smiled again. Usually this wouldn't matter, but you're legally an adult, so it's up to you on whether or not Ikika and you can stay in the dorms with Bakugou-kun. What do you call Midoriya-kun? Izuku thought about it for a minute before responding. I'm fine with it. It won't mess with my schedule, as I do school online. Are you sure we won't be disturbing any other students? Nedzu shook his head. The dorms are set up so that there is a large common room, kitchen, and dining table. Everyone gets their own room, but we can make an adjustment for you too. We can take two adjacent rooms and slightly alter them. One can be bigger for you and the other will be smaller. Of course, the only door from the hallway would lead to your room, but there would be a door connecting the rooms from the inside. Izuku seems to think about it more. That works for me, though we don't have anyone to help us move in. We would need that. Aizawa nods. I can stop by when you have everything you need packed up. No need to worry about furniture. We have a desk and bed frame in each room, though I'm sure Nedzu can make any more adjustments that you may need or like. The teens nodded, getting up to clean as the adults were bowing in thanks and saying goodbyes. They were informed that they had to be ready to move by 6 in the evening on Sunday, so the boys had plenty of time to pack all of their things before moving. The 2 days had passed fairly quickly, meaning Katsuki was able to ask Aizawa that they were ready by around noon on Sunday. But Aizawa knew that the most time-consuming part would be loading and unloading the car. Aizawa wasn't stupid. He remembered Tsukachi calling him late at night a while ago. He had handled a case where the boy thought he would be ignored due to being quirkless, even though he was sexually assaulted. He hadn't been given regular updates, but he was glad when Tsukachi told him that the product of the assault looked more like the boy than it did the assaulter. Aizawa would not have connected the dots all the way in some time if it weren't for the nickname the boy had for Bakugou. Tsukachi had told him about how the boy called another boy by a cute nickname, though the boy who was given the name looked the exact opposite. The eagerness that Nedzu had to invite Midoriya to live in the dorms, even though he wasn't a student of the school. Aizawa had hoped he was wrong, but seeing Bakugou holding a baby that looked similar to his friend, who'd called Bakugou Kaken, was a dead giveaway. He was just glad that the boy had people supporting him, even if one of those people was a prickly blonde. Aizawa had pulled up in front of the house he was at just a few days before. He saw Midoriya walk outside, carrying taken-apart furniture, most likely for the baby. Bakugou and Midoriya continued the cycle, only telling Aizawa that he can buckle the car seat in. Aizawa did as he was told and got in the driver's seat, letting the teens do as they pleased and finish packing. Once Aizawa heard the back doors open, he looked in the rearview mirror, seeing Bakugou help Midoriya buckle the baby in before he closed the door and got in the passenger's seat. They spent a short drive to Yui in a comfortable silence, the only noises being the baby's babbling. As Aizawa was helping unload the car, he looked at Midoriya. I hope you don't mind me asking, Midoriya-san, what's her name? I wasn't able to catch it on Friday. Midoriya smiled. I don't mind. Her name is Midoriya Ikika. Aizawa hummed. That's a pretty name. Izuku smiled and nodded at Katsuki's teacher. Katsuki let them talk while he started dragging stuff into the dorms. He opened the door and a bunch of classmates looked at him. Bakubro, how have you been? You haven't been answering anyone, Shitty Hair said, going to hug Katsuki. Katsuki ducked out of the hug. I'm good. Didn't mean to ignore anyone, just been busy. You think you can help me bring all this shit in? Kirishima raised an eyebrow. Dude, you do know the rooms are furnished, right? Katsuki just huffed and walked out, giving Kirishima a chance to follow or not. Kirishima followed after Katsuki. Once he gets to the car, everything makes sense. Midoriya-san is going to be living with them too, along with his sister. Kid. He didn't actually know what she was to him, but he didn't care. He grabbed something as he went to fist bump Midoriya. Midoriya-san. Good to see you. Didn't think I'd see you so soon though. Izuku shrugged as he grabbed the last bag from the trunk. Guess you guys just couldn't get enough of me. Kirishima laughed, not noticing that they left Katsuki behind. He only noticed once he walked into the dorms with Izuku by his side, the class wondering where Katsuki went. Aizawa follows after them, somehow ending up as the one carrying the baby that he hadn't even met before. He went in front of the teens, leading them to the room that was set aside for the teens and baby. None of the boys noticed the looks the students from the commons were giving them, too busy hauling up all of the furniture that needed to be rebuilt. Katsuki and Izuku just had Kirishima place everything outside of the front door. They thanked the boy for help before he went back down to the common area. Izuku had gently taken the baby carrier from Aizawa before bowing and thanking him for the help. It's no problem, kid. If anything else comes up, let me know. Izuku nodded and watched as the hero went down the hallway before disappearing after a turn. Izuku looked at Katsuki, just to see him bringing everything for Ikika into her designated room. Izuku put Ikika down in the main room, next to the bed. He grabbed the boxes from outside and placed them inside the room. Izuku went to join Katsuki when the blonde walked into the main room. He was expecting to have to build the crib before anything else, but Katsuki had other ideas. He dragged Izuku down onto the bed, curling around the green-haired boy. Kaken, we need to build her crib, Izuku whined, trying to push Katsuki up. Katsuki shifted up slightly, kissed Izuku, and then collapsed on top of Izuku again. It can wait for a little, she's sleeping. Let's take a nap, sunshine. Izuku blushed at the pet name before giving in and allowing himself to fall asleep. This time Katsuki woke up first, looking over to see Ikika crying. He picked her up and started carrying her around the room. He had wanted to put her down after she fell asleep about 15 minutes later, then realized that Izuku was right. They really should have built the crib earlier. He groaned. He didn't want to wake Izuku up for this. He needed to build the crib, but Ikika needed to be held or she'd get fussy. He groaned again, shifting Ikika so he was holding her to his chest with one arm before heading to the kitchen. Katsuki's main focus had been the kitchen to get something to drink before he tried to figure out how to build the crib by himself. He was opening a water bottle when he heard someone walk into the kitchen. He saw that it was Kaminari, one of his friends, not that he would admit it. Oi, dunce face. Kaminari turns to Katsuki, just to freeze when he sees the way Katsuki was holding the baby. Do you know where Shitty Hair is? Kaminari pointed to the living room, causing Katsuki to groan again as he walked into the room. The second he stepped in the room, all eyes were on him. He looked at all of his classmates before finding his friend. Shitty Hair, come on. Katsuki walked away, knowing Kirishima would follow him anyway. Kirishima was confused until he realized Katsuki was leading him to the room. Kirishima was about to ask a question when he saw that Izuku was sleeping on the bed. Can you help me build some of this stuff? I would be able to do it if she didn't have her death grip on my shirt. Kirishima nodded. Of course. Just let me know how I can help. Katsuki nods and gets Kirishima to help him set up the crib, mobile, diaper table, and the small bookshelf. It took a solid hour to get it all built properly. Katsuki thanked Kirishima and promised he would help the redhead with something the next time he needed help. Kirishima promised it was okay, but Katsuki insisted. Kirishima just nodded, saying goodbye before leaving the small family alone in their room. Katsuki walked over to Izuku and gave him a soft kiss. Izu, baby, the crib and stuff is all put together. Ikika's in her crib. I'm gonna go take a shower, okay? Izuku hummed and faced Katsuki with his eyes closed. Katsuki laughed for a second before giving Izuku another kiss. It had officially been 5 months since moving into the Yui dorm building, and it was weird. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't as good as it could be. Izuku was still getting used to being around so many people, but he's doing better. He's happy because everyone in the dorm building seems to be fine with Ikika, especially now that she has started walking. Everyone seems to be excited about having her around. Katsuki had said something about making the dorms less depressive. Before they knew it, everyone was known as Ikika's auntie this or uncle that. Izuku and Katsuki had never gotten her into that habit, though they suspect it from the influence of Auntie Mina and Uncle I. Sometimes the couple forget that they share the giant area with so many people, especially when they all go out. Izuku loves his new friends, he really does, but sometimes he misses the days when it's just him, Katsuki, and Ikika. So, based on that information, the class makes it an effort to leave the couple alone for a couple of hours every 2 weeks, as a way of thanking them for letting them have Ikika in their lives. They had never seen what the little family does during the time they were gone, as usually they were in their room before the class got back. So you can imagine the class's surprise when they came home early and figured out what the family does. Katsuki woke up and stretched, careful to not kick his boyfriend or daughter. Now that she is 18 months old, she has switched to a toddler bed, though she usually winds up with her parents sometimes during the night. Katsuki thought the dorms had seemed oddly quiet when he woke up, so he checked his phone. He saw the text from Kirishima saying that the class was at a movie theater and would be home in about an hour. Katsuki nodded to himself before he changed into sweatpants and a tank top. He walked to the kitchen to cook, hoping to be able to surprise Izuku and Ikika with breakfast in bed. Katsuki was about halfway done with dinner when he felt arms wrap across his torso. "Mornin', Kaken," Izuku grumbled into Katsuki's back. Katsuki couldn't reach Izuku because of the position, so he patted the younger boy's thigh. "Morning, love." Izuku turned pink, digging his face even further into Katsuki's back. Katsuki grinned. He loved knowing that any little nickname makes Izuku blush. It just confirms that his love for the boy is real. They had stayed like that, Izuku littering kisses all along Katsuki's back as he finished cooking breakfast. Just as Izuku was about to go get their daughter from their room, she came bounding in. "Papa, Dada." Katsuki crouched down and picked the girl up. "Good morning, princess." Izuku ruffled her hair. "Good morning, sweetheart." Ikika laughed and just talked to her dads while they cooked. Even though they didn't know what exactly she was saying, they would respond enthusiastically. Katsuki was laughing as he set the girl in her high chair, a custom gift from one of the students. He had gotten her a small serving of the breakfast he made for her, yogurt with chopped blueberries. Katsuki pushed Izuku into a seat and got him a serving of the breakfast before grabbing his own plate. He sat his plate on the table next to Izuku's. He stood next to the boy as he ate, an arm wrapped around the smaller waist. The couple was, yet again, responding enthusiastically to everything Ikika babbled about, even if most of it was just gibberish to them. They had just finished with their breakfast when they heard the dorm doors open. They didn't acknowledge the people that walked in, waiting for Ikika to notice them first. Once Ikika noticed the people, she demanded to be let down, so Katsuki had put her on the floor as Izuku grabbed their dishes from the table. Katsuki walked up behind Izuku as he did the dishes, draping himself over the boy's back. He had his chin sitting on the shorter's shoulder. Katsuki would occasionally turn and give Izuku a kiss on the neck or shoulder, but other than that, they enjoyed the serenity that was their little family. Their lives had been perfect. Izuku couldn't have asked for more. It had been 2 years since Katsuki had become a professional hero, shortening his hero name to just Dynamite. It had been 2 years since Izuku graduated from his high school and started his career as a professional quirk analyst. Izuku was so proud that his talents hadn't gone to waste. His number one customer was Netsu-san, purely because he has Izuku do an analysis on every hero course each year. Izuku was happy about it, as Netsu constantly boasted about how his analyses were always getting better, getting him more large groups as customers, which paid him evidently more. The last few years had been hard, him and Katsuki thrown out into the world alongside their now 5-year-old daughter. She had a very rough year last year, having been announced quirkless. It had started off really bad, her insecurities getting the better of her, though Katsuki hadn't let that go on for long. Every night he would give her a new speech. Izuku never knew what they were about, but they worked. She had come to them, claiming she wanted to be the first quirkless hero. Both boys encouraged her as much as possible. He didn't want to make her feel the way he had felt when he was young. Izuku was excited. It was almost as in Katsuki's 5-year anniversary. Izuku was ready to spoil Katsuki. As on any other days, he would complain that the spoiling wasn't necessary. Izuku had been getting suspicious recently, though he always did during this time. Katsuki had always done something big for their anniversary. The biggest one was during their 4-year anniversary last year, when Katsuki had gotten him many types of bouquets, flowers, candy, office supplies, self-care items, and hero merch. Izuku cried for a few hours after he got his surprise. It was so thoughtful of Katsuki. This year was different though. Katsuki had gotten Shinsu in on it. Katsuki and Shinsu had never really gotten along in high school. Once they got older, they had gotten less likely to attack each other, mostly because Izuku wanted them to get along. Izuku tried to ask Ikika if she knew what her dad was planning, as she was in on it last year. Izuku was so confused. What could Katsuki be keeping from him and Ikika, but sharing freely with Shinsu? As the day came up, Izuku's anxiety had just gotten worse. Ikika still had no clue what was going on, and neither did her. The only normal thing about the day was that Katsuki had picked out their outfits. Izuku chose to shove his anxiety aside as he and Katsuki left for their usual anniversary dinner, leaving Ikika with Shinsu to babysit. They went to their usual anniversary restaurant. They always had a table open for them during this time of year. They got their usual dinners and just enjoyed each other's company. Izuku doesn't know how Katsuki still managed to make him blush all the time, though he loved the fact just as much as it confused him. Usually they would get dessert at the restaurant, but Katsuki made them leave before they could. They would usually go for a short walk around the park as well, but Katsuki insisted they take the long route around instead. Izuku agreed for the sake of not confusing himself anymore. Izuku was telling Katsuki about one of the quirks he had analyzed earlier in the day when he slowly lowered his volume. Izuku was shocked. There were 2 rows of candles, lighting up one of the trees that the two would always climb as kids. Izuku turned around only to see Shinsu standing next to Katsuki as they sent Ikika over to Izuku. Shinsu sent the blonde forward and slowly backed away while pulling his phone out. Izuku looked back at the blonde just as he got down on one knee. Izuku put his hands up to his mouth as Katsuki started speaking. Izuku, my love, we've known each other for just over 20 years. I'll admit that during some of those years I wasn't the best person, but I want to make up for all of that. These last 5 years have been the best years of my life. I got to watch you grow beside me as we raised a beautiful little girl together. I'm so honored that I can proudly call you my other half. So, Midoriya Izuku, will you do me the honor of letting me be your other half? Izuku's hand was still covering his mouth, the other wiping his tears. He flung himself towards Katsuki, Ikika following through to join the family hug. Yes, Kakin. Yes, I do. Izuku was crying tears of joy at this point, not knowing how else to react. Shinsu stopped the recording and sent the video to the group chat they had created in their first year. Best Hero Course Class. Video file attached. He finally did it, fuckers. Mina, fucking finally. Everyone get ready to plan a wedding. Izuku and Katsuki have really made the most out of their lives. Their oldest daughter, Ikika, is in the hero course at Yui, Class 1A, just like her father. Though, unlike him, she's set to become the world's first quirkless hero. Her fathers had supported her dream since day one, going far enough to offer her for the recommendation exam instead of the regular exam. She had refused the recommendation exam, wanting to set an example for her younger siblings. Her fathers had gone into being foster parents as soon as they could, always taking in those who were quirkless or had quirks in which others would call villainous. Ikika was ecstatic when her first foster brother came in, helping him train as well, knowing that their parents would support their dream no matter what it was. Currently, Ikika had 3 adoptive siblings. Rin, who was 13 and had a mutation quirk that gave him wings, but they were really bony and leather-like, which led to people calling him a demon or devil all the time. Then there was Milo. He was 10 and quirkless, brought over to Japan from America to be sold to a human trafficking ring. Thank God her parents had found him before that happened, though. Finally, there was Aurora. She was 8 and had an interesting quirk called Silent Siren. It was similar to a regular siren quirk, except it would only work if she was completely silent. Many of her old foster homes abused her for it, claiming she used it on them without them knowing. All in all, Ikika loves her siblings, whether they were adopted by her parents or just fostered by them for a little while. She hoped she could be the next symbol of hope. She didn't want to be a symbol like All Might was, but as a symbol that there's hope, you can always do better. She can't believe that she's almost already there, having been told by many middle and elementary schoolers how she has inspired them.